will say that if I sort of get into a little coughing episode, I might have to hand it off, but I'm doing better. It's slow but steady, and yeah, it's good. But I appreciate you asking.
Well, I have experienced my second COVID shot at the Denton facilities. And I want to tell you, I've never seen anything as well organized or as well done. And I'm sending kudos out to everybody in
it's been
county.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I got mine yesterday, and I mean, from the time we checked in to the time we left, including the 15-minute wait period, was probably 30 minutes, 35 minutes. So
exactly. It first one I took at the high school athletic center, and the second one I took at the
Speedway.
Yep. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And so, and like you said, 30, maybe 40 minutes tops on both of them. And everybody was so upbeat and nice. And if you made a wrong turn like I did, they were more than courteous to get me straight back out, send me on my way. So
that's great.
Fantastic all the way.
Been a good experience. Okay, go ahead, Connie.
I just wanted to comment. I've worked there, volunteered there for a number of things. It is absolutely amazing. And I am so excited and pleased about the buses.
Yes.
To bring the people in. And that's been, and the number of people on buses seems to be growing. So I think that's wonderful.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you for that comment, and especially the report on the buses, because I think that's important. I think that was a great initiative that we collaborated with the county. All right, well, Lindsay, we'll go ahead and get started. And this meeting is being recorded. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, I will call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Denton County Transportation Authority to order. It is 10:04 a.m. And Diane, would you mind delivering the invocation?
Sure. Lord, we thank you for this glorious day in which we come together to reason the opportunities of DCTA. Lord, we are humbled that you have called all present to serve those in our communities. Lord, we invite you here today to give a special measure of grace, wisdom, and discernment. Lord, your word reminds us that to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose. Father, as we continue in this season of uncertain times, remind us that our challenges and your grace and goodness run parallel, and your mercies are new each day. Help us never lose sight of the beauty of those things that are good. And Father, we ask for your eyes and your heart, Lord, to see the needs of our family and our friends and our neighbors, Lord, and that we are called to action. Father, I thank you for this opportunity to glorify you today. Father, give us wisdom as we continue. And we ask this in the name of your Son, our Lord. Amen.
All right, so I will, we're in the public comment portion of our agenda. So I will read the statement out loud, and then we'll see if there's any public comments either that have been submitted via email, in writing, or that are with us on the call. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the DCTA Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters relating to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Any person wishing to address the DCTA Board of Directors regarding any item may do so by utilizing the raise hand function of the Zoom meeting at this time. Citizens that are not able to connect virtually to the Zoom meeting must email his or her public comment to the email lbaker@dcta.net no later than 3 p.m. on Tuesday, March the 9th, 2021, to ensure the comments will be read. The Board of Directors is not permitted to take action on any subject raised by a speaker during public comments. However, the DCTA Board of Directors may have the item placed on a future agenda for action, refer the item to DCTA administration for further study or action, and briefly state existing DCTA policy or provide a brief statement of factual information in response to the inquiry. Lindsay, did we have any public comments that were submitted by email?
We did not receive anything, and we do not currently have any raised hands.
Okay, so then seeing no public comment, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is the consent agenda. Are there any questions on any of the consent agenda items? And the chair would entertain consent agenda items 1 through 3, and the chair would entertain a motion on such.
Chair Watts, if I may make a quick note
Sure.
about the packet pages that are listed throughout our slides. I just want to clarify that those page numbers listed are consistent with the PDF.
Okay.
So just wanted to make that clarification if there were any questions about that.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. All right. If we could pull the consent agenda slide down so I could see the panel. Any questions on the consent agenda items? If not, chair would entertain action.
Motion to approve,
We
Chairman.
have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Board Member Costa and Vice Chair seconded by Molina. All in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
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 All opposed by no. All right. TJ, did you vote? I think he's frozen.
I think he may, Board Member Gilmore, let me see if we can unmute you. Mr. Gilmore, can you hear us?
TJ? Oh, let me see if I can't.
I'm back.
There we go.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
it went away.
Well, we'll do that again, if you don't mind. Board Member Costa, could you go ahead and repeat your motion? And Vice Chair, your second.
Yes, I make a motion for approval.
I'll make a second.
All right, and this is for the consent agenda. So all in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your right hand.
Aye.
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 All right. Motion carries, I believe, 4-0. So we've got 4 board members on. Is that correct? We're missing Board Member Burke. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That's
All
my count.
All right. I'm sorry, somebody said something.
No, I just saying that was what I had written
Okay.
down. So unless he's
Okay.
hiding.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Joe. All right, I believe, let's see, I've got, all this stuff is, okay, so now we're moving on to the regular agenda. So our first agenda item is presentation of audit report for fiscal year ended 9/30/2020 by Weaver and Tidwell, and approval of the FY 2020 financial statements and supplemental information.
Thank you. Yes, Jennifer Ripka with Weaver is here with us today. She's going to do a brief presentation just on the required communications for the board. And then I'm happy to answer any questions regarding the comprehensive annual financial report, which is included in your packet on pages 134 to 209, as well as the single audit report, which is included in your packet on pages 210 to 221. With that, I will hand it over to Jennifer.
Thank you, Marissa. Lindsay, are you going to do the clicking for me?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So hopefully
Thank you.
won't have the technical issues.
Awesome. Okay, great. My name is Jennifer Ripka, and I am the audit partner with Weaver that performed the external audit for fiscal year ended September 30th, 2020. You can go ahead and. So the audit process, we perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards as well as generally accepted government auditing standards. We, in addition to the financial statement audit, we do a single audit over the federal financial assistance for DCTA. We also perform the required financial data review as required by NTD. And then in addition, we perform tests over compliance outside of federal financial assistance with regards to laws, regulations, contracts, other green agreements, and then compliance with the Public Funds Investment Act. As far as the financial statements themselves, so the comprehensive annual financial report, we issued an unmodified opinion. That's a clean opinion, and it's the highest level of assurance that can be placed on a set of financial statements. In addition to looking at the account balances, we also do a review of internal controls over financial reporting. And we noted no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies with regards to internal controls, and there was no non-compliance that relates to the financial statements. We also do that single audit over the federal financial assistance, and we issue an opinion over compliance. So like when we issue an opinion over the financial statements, we're looking at the account balances for the financial statements. For federal financial assistance, we're looking at compliance over the required compliance requirements for the programs that we test. This year, we tested federal transit cluster, and we noted that there were no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, and there were no audit findings that were noted in conjunction with that testing. In addition, DCTA is a low risk auditee. You can go. As far as results, that's really it, but we do like to point out areas of strength and accomplishment, and those are listed here. And you all can read that, but I do want to take a moment to thank Marissa and Amber. I've been on this engagement since I was a senior associate. This is a great organization to work with, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to work with you all. And thank really Marissa and Amber for all of the hard work that they put into the audit. It's very difficult to do your job in addition to dealing with the auditors, and so we really do appreciate it. Lindsay, you can go forward to the next one. Just more areas of strength and accomplishment. And so a really great audit, no findings, no audit adjustments, no issues with internal control. And so I just want to say thank you, and look forward to seeing a lot of you, because we do serve cities and school districts as well throughout the Metroplex, but we appreciate the opportunity to serve y'all.
Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer?
Yes, I have one question, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Yes, and I'm not sure, Jennifer, this is a question for you, or maybe it could be for DCTA staff, but on page 36 of your report, page 185 of our packet, note 10, easement obligations, and it talks about we have an obligation of $100,000 through 2025. And I just want to understand, is that what we're paying DART just to operate the rail lines? And is that what an issue that was, I think Raymond Suarez might have actually kind of worked through some of that. So I'm just want to make sure that that's what that is.
Yes, that is our operating agreement to run on the land that DART owns. It was total of about 16, I want to say 16.9 million. We paid 15 million up front, and then the remainder we've been paying off on an annual basis. And so this is the remainder of that payment. So
it's not forever. It's just once it ends at 2029, it just ends. Is that right? Or is it an ongoing annual? We just pay like a lease payment, I should say.
Brandon.
Yeah, yes, it's been treated as a rent payment at the end or prior to the end of the contractual agreement. DCTA and DART will likely need to sit down and create a new arrangement for continued use of the track. So we have that negotiation to do. It's many years out, but likely we'll need to renegotiate. That's why I think as we talk about having joint operations and collaborating with DART,
Okay.
we might have an opportunity to do other things, but I don't want to get too far off of this item. That's what the $100,000 is for.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I think me and you had a conversation about that, and I just want to make sure that's the same thing.
Yes, so the agreement ends in 2029 until we make additional arrangements.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions for either Jennifer or myself?
All right. I believe that will conclude this agenda item then. Do we need to take any action on this? Approval of the FY 2020 financial statements? I guess we do. Yep.
Yes, sir. And I would just like to take this opportunity to thank Jennifer and her over the 8.5 years that I have worked with them. They've always been extremely accommodating, no matter what schedule change we have or need for accommodation. They've been a great partner. They make it as easy as possible to be audited. So, so we've really enjoyed their partnership and Jennifer's guidance over the years as we've stood up an LGC and gone through several iterations of changes, and their guidance has been invaluable. So we just wanted to thank her and her team. And yes, if there's not any additional questions, then staff recommends that the board approve the FY20 financial statements and supplementary information.
Any questions on the financial statements and supplementary information? If not, the chair would entertain action on this item.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the item as stated.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, and we have a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Agenda item 3. Nope. Agenda item 2. Getting ahead of myself. Consider approval of an RFP for audit services for FY 2021 through 2023.
Yes, sir. We released an RFP in December for annual audit services. We had our term with Weaver ends on March 31st. And so we received a total of 7 proposals. The entities that proposed are listed on page 222 of your packet. The evaluation committee requested additional interviews and meetings with 2 of those firms. And we are recommending for approval Plant Moran for an initial term of 3 years with the option to extend for 2 additional 1-year terms. The fees are listed. The RFP in its entirety is included in your packet on pages 224 to 264. Plant Moran's proposal is from 265 to 327. And then our scores are included as well from the evaluation committee. Obviously, Jennifer Ripka with Weaver had just presented our audit. We've been extremely pleased with Weaver over the years. They've been an excellent partner. Like I said, they've been super accommodating with any question we have, any new change that we're making. And primarily, as any of you know, making the decision to change an audit firm is a little nerve-wracking and a big undertaking for staff. With the potential of, starting from scratch with a new team. But Plant Moran has a robust technology offering, and we thought their additional resources and technology platform could potentially make the audit more efficient and save staff time overall. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And if there are no questions, then staff would recommend that the board approve the award to Plant Moran. Mayor, you're muted.
Any questions for staff?
I don't have any questions, but I'd like to thank staff. I know that it's hard at times to leave a vendor that's been really good. And I appreciate what staff is doing by looking at something that can help DCTA better. And so thank you for doing that. And with that, Mayor, if there's no other comments, I'd like to make a motion for approval.
All right, we have a motion for approval. Any discussion or a second? Do we have a second?
Second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, passes unanimously. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which is consider approval of an interlocal agreement with DART for cooperative procurements. Uh-oh. And can y'all, everybody okay? Got a little feedback?
Yeah, Nicole, something was coming whenever you unmuted, so I just muted you. Something weird was coming through from your audio. It was screeching.
There we go. We can't
Now
hear
we
you
can't
though.
hear you.
Vice Chair Molina, I'm gonna step out just for a couple of moments. So if you could take the gavel, I'll be right back.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Nicole maybe logged out to try to,
Okay.
oh, she's
You
still
won't.
there.
Technology, you gotta love it.
That's
I
right.
know it.
We'll just take a moment here.
Open your volume mixer by right clicking on your, okay.
Ooh,
Wait,
yeah, it's still doing that.
Nicole, you
wanna-
can come to my office if you need to.
Yeah.
I was just- Y'all can do an office swap real quick.
I was gonna say, if Christina wants to jump to item 5, we can go to item 5 and while Nicole works out the technical issues.
We can do that and she can make her way down here and we will share a laptop.
That's fine.
Okay.
Things going?
So Lindsay, if you could take us to, okay, item number 5. Thank you.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Certainly.
Mr. Vice Chair, we're on item agenda 3, correct? We were.
We were.
Could we, because number 5 is discuss the DCTA. It'd be, I think it would be helpful if our chairman was present. Is he present or he's
No,
just?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep. I just had to
I was
take a
just gonna
break.
say, if you're
Yep.
not, then let's go to 4, because I think 5 is going to be real important. So thank you. Sorry.
You bet. No, I appreciate that. So are we still having technical difficulties with,
Oh,
go ahead. Nicole?
Christina, I believe Nicole's
have
in your
re-
office now?
I have relocated to Marissa's office.
Okay.
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 So we're ready to proceed on the agenda item 3 then?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So the information on item 3 can be found on your packet pages 331 through 335. DART staff had approached DCTA about utilizing DCTA's mobility as a service procurement and agreements. Since our procurement for MOS allows other government agencies the ability to utilize the MOS firms that were selected. So DART is interested in utilizing those MOS contracts for the purpose of providing a proposal to the McKinney Urban Transit District for the purpose of Collin County Transit Service. However, in this process, staff has identified additional benefits for such an agreement like this. So approval of this ILA would allow DCTA and DART to utilize each other's procurement agreements for the purchase of light goods and services to avoid duplicate procurement efforts, as well as obtain volume pricing. There's no financial impact to entering into this interlocal agreement. It just allows DCTA and DART to collectively utilize each other's procurements. I'm happy to answer any questions about this item, but if there are none, staff would recommend that the board authorize the CEO to execute an interlocal agreement with DART for cooperative purchasing.
I guess the question I have is, because I know with the cities, we do that often with other municipalities, that if they're able to get something a little bit less, we can opt in to their procurement process or their vendors. Is this really what we're talking about here? I mean, it's really not
Absolutely.
costing us. Okay. All right.
It's exactly the same, exactly the same.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or chair would entertain action on this item?
Move to approve.
We have a motion for approval.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor of agenda item 3, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right, motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is consider approval of Kittleson Task Order for Public Involvement Plan Services.
Thank you. As we have talked about before, the transition from fixed route to an on-demand service will require the public involvement process. It's going to play a major role in meeting the FTA regulations that are put forth in making a change of this type. So the purpose of this task order with Kittleson and Associates is to develop and execute that required public involvement and Title VI analysis that would allow us to then bring back the final service plan to the board for approval as we look at transitioning from fixed route to on-demand. While staff typically would handle the public involvement process internally, we've kind of identified that the breadth of outreach that would be required for such a significant change like this is going to require contract assistance. So the total cost of the task order is not to exceed $77,057 and is currently already captured in the FY21 budget. I'm happy to answer any questions. If there are none, staff would recommend that the board approve task order number 4 with Kittleson and Associates to develop and execute the required public involvement process and Title VI analysis for the transition from fixed route to on-demand service in an amount not to exceed $77,057.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I've got a few questions, but
I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
okay.
You're muted.
So can anybody, I've had a hard time understanding on page 340 of the packet. I'm trying to pull that up, look at my notes. Item 4.
Correct, regarding access service?
Yeah, can you, what does it mean?
So the FTA requires transit agencies to provide access service in accordance with the fixed routes that are currently offered. By making a change in removing the majority of our fixed route service and only providing the UNT shuttle service, which technically is not fixed route, there is some conversation about the fact that perhaps the access service that we're providing today wouldn't need to be provided based on that FTA requirement. So we have been exploring with FTA, Accenture and Cambridge Systems has been assisting, as well as Kittleson and Associates. All of those entities have experience in kind of looking at FTA requirements and use cases of other transit agencies and how they've addressed that. And so we kind of want to pull all of the minds together to figure out what really is the best approach so that staff can put together a recommendation that then needs to come to the board regarding the agency's philosophy on access service now that a good portion of our service would be on demand and not fixed route.
Next is, can you tell me a little bit about what non-ADA users are using access services and why? I mean, that my implication here is that we've got non-ADA folks. Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
We do have non-ADA folks, people that have not qualified for ADA service, but still might have some maybe a disability or a challenge that doesn't qualify them for ADA, but we consider them non-ADA. As part of our conversations with VIA, we've talked a bit about kind of commingling services and the fact that we would kind of after the initial launch of the MOS service, that we would look at taking those non-ADA folks and pushing them to the VIA service so that the access service that we're providing is specifically for ambulatory trips only. We could provide you a breakdown. I mean, I think staff thinks that we need to be pushing those non-ADA folks to an on-demand in order for the service to be more efficient and cost effective. But currently, in the current state that we're in, we are offering a mix of ADA and non-ADA services via access.
Yeah, and I've got a couple. TJ, did you have some others?
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Please,
okay.
Mayor.
Yeah. obviously this is going to, by the very indication that we're needing to hire or proposing to hire an outside firm for the public involvement process. So it's going to be very involved. And so has there been some thought about working together either through a committee, like sort of a select committee of maybe the city PIOs to really make, and the county to ensure that we're utilizing all the resources? Because I know our, city of Denton, I mean, they've got a lot of input and a lot of social media out in the community. Has there been a thought about trying to, whether it's a formal committee or whether it's an ad hoc committee, just getting together to really help try to coordinate that, to really make that outreach more efficient and more penetrable, so to speak?
100%. So that is typically how we would conduct our normal public
Okay.
process, is that we do have kind of a core group of county, city, social service agencies. We have a kind of a database of those contacts. The university is included in that. And we definitely go to them and say, this is our plan. How can you assist? We're looking to get feedback from, your particular segment of individuals. And so that has worked really well for us in the past. But we kind of foresee the need to even cast a wider net than we typically would. And we foresee there being a lot of one-on-one, like a speaker to a group. Whereas in the past, maybe we've sent digital materials or we've sent a video, because we want to make sure that people understand the positives of making a change to on-demand service.
Right.
What we have found to date is that it takes a conversation, and we have kind of an outreach team of one person with me assisting, and it's just, we don't have enough bodies to kind of do that. And so Kittleson, as part of this task order, would really be stepping in to kind of help us expand our team so that we can truly go out there and educate people about what this change means to ensure that we're receiving quality feedback in return.
Okay. One other thing is, and the board can give some direction on what, if this is something that they have an interest in, because this is so important. I didn't know if, should we have within our agenda, we have those informational reports at the end of the agenda that are just sort of a staff memo, if you will, or white paper on whatever the issue is. And if there's no questions, we move on. There's not necessarily a presentation required. Something that maybe is in our board package gives us an update on, how Kittles, what's the name of the?
Kittleson and Associates.
Kittleson, yeah. I was thinking of, anyway. Sort of the development of the plan and how they're rolling that out. So it could either be on the information, or you could send it out in those Friday emails, whatever is the most efficient for staff, together with if the board has any direction or any other comments on that. But I think it'd be good for us to have some input, not input, but some just report on a, regular basis that here's what's happening. So does board members, y'all have any comments on that or suggestions? Or
I think I would like to see it on the informational part of our agenda.
Okay, all right.
So we can include a public involvement report for each board meeting, just kind of a recap of a progress report. Here's what's been done. Here's still what needs to be done. And then as we bring in July, when we bring that final proposed service plan back to the board will receive everything in its original state as part of the recap report. So you will receive all of the individual comments. You will receive a recap of how we communicated and what groups we met with. But we could definitely provide a monthly progress report.
Okay. TJ, Commissioner Gilmore, I thought you had a comment or?
Yeah, no, I'm just that I if we need to spend more money, I want this as over communicated as we possibly can. So I just want to let staff know that, there will not be too much, in my opinion, as far as communication goes for this service change.
Thank you for that.
And one of the aspects of this task order is that even after the board has approved the final service plan, part of this task order is for Kittleson to assist us in reaching back out to the organizations that we talked to receive public feedback, so that we can keep them in the loop that, hey, the board has approved this service plan. And then we are also already in communication with VIA to work with their team on an actual communication strategy in that month leading up to the launch date, as well as continuing.
And then are they looking, just quickly, is Kittleson looking at the two different versions of the VIA recommendations for paratransit? We got the peak paratransit versus standard. I mean, how does that all kind of work? And I know we were talking about maybe phasing that, right?
Correct.
So could you kind of walk me through that piece?
Sure. So the meeting, I believe, that has been scheduled for April 7th. Lindsay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the special called board meeting that's been scheduled for April 7th is specifically to go over kind of I'm going to call it proposal 3, because it is the proposed service plan that has been refined based on roundtable feedback. So all of that will go to the board at that special called meeting in early April. And then it is what the board approves at that point is what then goes to the public.
Okay.
So the board will have complete buy-in and approval of that plan, which will consequently end up in determining kind of the contract negotiations and whatnot. The approval kind of is a critical step in kind of determining not only the contract, but also what goes to the public.
Okay. Can I have you do me one favor?
Sure.
Since we've already seen plans 1, 2, and 3, can you call that 4?
Sure. Absolutely.
I just know what's going to happen to my poor brain.
Yeah.
Sure. It is
Great.
known as proposal number 4.
And we have an agenda item to discuss that as well. So coming
Yes,
up,
sir.
so we'll make sure that we get all that squared away. Any other questions on agenda item number 4 with the Kittleson task order?
I think I'm good. Thank you.
This requires action, I believe.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve,
Second.
and we have a second. All in favor of approval of agenda item number 4, Kittleson Task Force Order for Public Involvement Plan Services, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, on my agenda, it goes from 4 to 6. So we'll go to the next agenda item, which is, make sure this is the right one, status of DCTA and Trinity Metro's partnership for joint bus operations and maintenance. Is that correct?
Actually, no, the next one is item number 5, discuss joint DCTA and DART rail operations and maintenance facility.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll call it because I don't have the number 5 here on my agenda.
That is very strange.
No, that's okay. It was just the note, so it's no big deal. That's why I asked. All right, so agenda item number 5, discuss joint DCTA DART rail O&M facilities, operations, and potential partnerships.
Yes, so we have been providing monthly updates to the board based on our conversations that we've been having with DART, staff to staff. So we have a little more detail to share after our recent meeting. We're really breaking the whole partnership opportunity into a few different phases, with our primary focus right now on phase 1, which is to build a temporary facility on DCTA property at the rail operations and maintenance facility. This facility would be used by DART to accept the delivery of their new Stadler Flirt vehicles for the Silver Line and then they would conduct the testing and do the commissioning all within that facility. DART has budgeted approximately $13 million for the facility, which also includes track work, the design, construction, utilities, and drainage and grading of the site, any type of relocation of the existing A-train laydown yard, the access road, the bullpen, all of those things, really to make it a cohesive piece of the rail operations and maintenance facility that we currently have. That $13 million also would include Class 2 upgrades to the track between Beltline and Trinity Mills, which is where the Silver Line will need to make sure it gets onto the correct rail to reach our facility. In our discussions with DART, though we don't have an ILA yet, and I will get to that, we have had some conversation. We want to best leverage what contracts DART has available to them, as well as what on-call contracts DCTA has available to them. So in looking at those contracts, it looks like probably the best arrangement would be for DART to be responsible for the design, and clearly DCTA would be involved in that conversation. And then DCTA can be responsible for the construction, being that it is DCTA land. That just makes the most sense since it's on our property. So really the phase one is just the temporary facility, which you kind of think of like a metal tent that would last 3 to 5 years in order to process the vehicles that come in for DART. On the next slide, we can talk about phase two. And phase two is the expansion of our existing rail operations and maintenance facility. I know that DART staff is currently working internally to identify what the best budget would be. We are getting ready to start budget season from a staff perspective. And from my understanding, they're estimating, I think their staff's request will be approximately 40 million of capital funding to assist in this phase two. Phase two would include not only the expansion of our existing facility as far as the administrative offices, the maintenance bays, and train wash and the fueling. Those are the areas that are on the south side of our building that would need to be expanded in order to accommodate the FLIRT vehicles that DART is purchasing from Stadler, as they are longer vehicles than our existing vehicles. Another area, whenever we did a walkthrough of the building, is looking at our existing locker room space that's currently occupied by DCTA bus operations that operates out of Louisville, as well as Rio Grande Pacific rail operations staff. So DART recognizes that they would need to add some additional locker room space to accommodate their operations staff that would be sharing the facility. And we've really got to start focusing and digging a little deeper on the joint facility agreement. This is where the language would come into the ILA. So we've discussed with the board before that we do have an existing ILA with DART, and our approach is to just modify a portion of the DART ILA to address how we, what the arrangement is between DCTA and DART for phase one, phase two, and then how the facility is operated jointly and how we occupy that space. On the next slide. So as we continue to focus on that, the planning of phase one, because that one has a pretty solid deadline for DART, as they're expecting their vehicles to be delivered in mid-2022. So that facility would need to be completed by then. So we estimate that we could have design and construction of that phase completed by the first quarter of 2022. Still many steps between where we are now and the completion of that temporary facility, but we're definitely headed in the right direction. The other part of the discussion that we will continue is, again, finding the correct language that we need to include in the ILA to address those parameters around the joint facility. Having DCTA staff, as well as our contractors, DART staff and DART contractors, looking at space utilization of that building is going to be important. Facility lease rates, because DART recognizes that they'll need to likely lease, pay a lease fee to DCTA for space. And just looking at what are the different things that we need to include in the ILA. So where we are on that is DART has a draft list that they're sending over later this week that DCTA expects to start reviewing that and including things from our perspective. We feel that that needs to be included. And our goal is really to bring this to the DCTA board at the next board meeting in April with a fully outlined, I guess, deal points, if you will, of this arrangement to be included in as a modification to the existing ILA between DCTA and DART. Are there any questions about either phase one, phase two, or kind of our path forward?
Well, let me first of all that was my error on the agenda number. I was looking at some of my own notes, so it's all good. I got everything I needed to get. It was my operator error, so I want to be
Thank you.
accountable for that. The agenda item says, okay, so just discuss. So when you say that DART may need to lease, or we got to work out a lease, who's going to own this facility?
Those are the things that we need to work through. Raymond, do you want to chime in on this?
I mean, do we have enough information to even talk about, I mean, if we're still in the preliminary stage, so what you're wanting from the board today is what?
I'm just providing an update.
Okay,
to
and so
the
just
board of where
questions
we
and things
are.
such as that. Gotcha. Okay.
Correct. Yes, because we are hoping to bring this to the board at next month's board meeting, the modification of the ILA, which will identify all those deal points. Who will own it? Who's responsible for maintenance? We really anticipate, to kind of answer your question. So we currently have a joint facility at Trinity Mills that DART Rail Operations uses and DCTA Rail Operations uses. How that arrangement worked is that DART was responsible for the construction on their property.
I remember
DCTA
that.
paid for a portion of the construction and then pays an ongoing kind of operations and maintenance or lease fee. So when you look at this new project, it is highly likely that it would mirror that type of project.
Okay.
I think that
guess-
it's still, there's still an opportunity to have discussions. We're trying to set up a meeting between DART's leadership and DCTA's leadership to talk about what are the opportunities from a regional perspective. Should we, and there might be a wonderful opportunity for us to really think about a future state where we're very much integrated as a rail operation. And if so, then what opportunities are there for DCTA and DART to jointly compete for federal grants, to talk to the COG about those sorts of things. But I think it's too early to say right now. We weren't even sure until the last conversation that DART was committed to spend funds, and now they are. So we need to start really having those conversations.
So a couple of observations. Yeah, so the discussions that you're talking about, those are, it sounds like the immediate conversation and the immediate need is, first of all, do we even want to enter into this type of sort of arrangement? And second, how do we get it on the ground fast enough to meet their needs that is also beneficial to DCTA?
Yes.
I think that's going to be, I mean, this is just me personally, and not knowing all the discussions that have happened. I think to bring it back at the April board meeting with all this information that still needs to be decided, if that can be pulled together, that's great. My only concern is I would like to see some of that information and those deal points prior to that, even prior to the 3-day posting, because this is a big decision. And I don't want to have to be making a decision like this based upon data I received like 3 days prior. So I know that time is of the essence, but yet it's important that we have all the information, that you guys have the time, quite frankly.
Right. And I hear your concern, and we shared that similar concern. So when we spoke with DART, I believe their staff is planning to take it to their board in May. Now, DART has 2 board meetings, I think, typically in a month. So I don't know if that would be the early May or late May. So in the event that we're not ready in April, we have some leeway room, and we could always bring it back in May.
Okay. And the second, and so to make sure that I have a clear understanding of this, because if I'm off, then just cut me off. So in this phase 1 is when the upgrade to class 2 track, excuse me, has to occur. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. So it's been brought to my attention that is there an opportunity here to see what it would cost to upgrade to a whatever that is, it a class 4 or a class to upgrade to where it provides a little bit better and faster connectivity, and maybe more directly down to the it's Silver Line or something that's going to DFW.
Yes.
I think it would be important for the board to have that option. I mean, it might be too expensive, but yet, to me, I guess the difference between a Class 2 rail and a Class 4 is the rail. I mean, there might be some construction differences, some engineering differences, but if you've mobilized a crew out there already, it would just be nice to see what would that upgrade be. Because it would give us the best information to make a decision, not just on the immediate future for DCTA, but something that, because once it's done, you're not going to go back and rip it up.
Right.
I mean,
And what that would allow us to
be
do,
expensive.
just so the entire board is kind of on the same page, by upgrading the track from Class 2 to Class 4, that would allow the A train to travel down to meet the Silver Line at the Beltline station, which if you recall, we have had some conversations in the past about the southbound extension of the A train. So instead of it stopping at Trinity Mills, there would be a possibility of it extending all the way to Beltline and providing one less transfer for those who are wanting to get to the Silver Line. So by going from Class 2 to Class 4, then that would be kind of a first step in getting to implementing that project.
Okay, so the Class 4 putting the rail in is more of a it's planning ahead, because just doing that will not get us down to the silver. There's still other things that we must do, but what that would do is, if we decide to make that decision, then that particular segment has been taken care of. Is that what I'm understanding?
That is correct.
Okay. I don't think it would be that much. I'm not sure who figures these costs. I don't know if it's DART. I don't know who's handling the budgeting of this, but that would just be it doesn't have to be an exact to the penny number, but a ballpark would be helpful, because if it's out of the ballpark, we don't do it. If it's close, then we might have some decisions to make.
Right.
Well, I think the mayor chair makes excellent points, because I would imagine that going from, and really what's going to happen if we just allow them to move forward and just say build Class 2, if at some point in the future we do want to move the Green Line to Beltline, then you still have to go back and rip out that Class 2 rail and put in Class 4 rail. You got to do it. So there's an opportunity to look at the difference, and when you consider that the cost in the future may be, it may very well be worth spending a little extra money on that. I think that's a great observation, Chair. I would certainly consider that very favorably, that the numbers make sense to us.
And that particular topic is one of those things that Raymond and I have on the agenda to discuss in that meeting that he was mentioning that we're working to set up with DART leadership, is to look at what are all the future opportunities that now exist because DCTA and DART are partnering on this specific project. And getting to Beltline is one of those things. And it does change from the previous time we looked at it, where it was just DCTA looking at it solely alone.
And
so there are a lot of other
add,
opportunities.
Christina, if you don't mind, we've had some very encouraging conversations with their interim CEO, David Leininger, their executive vice president, around the concept of we need to get together and have a conversation about what are the technical and infrastructure requirements to really operate this as a seamless system. So DART already has their plan. Part of that is to operate Class 2 track, but we are very much interested in understanding collectively what are the advantages to go into Class 4. The immediate advantage is that it improves the signals and crossings, and ultimately you do that to improve the speed of the service between the two locations. And so we're very much interested in looking at that. I think there's a lot of interest on DART's side to have DCTA at the table as a partner, so that it just makes it a lot smarter and more efficient, and an opportunity to get additional funds.
Okay. Well, I think the staff have direction on as far as, well, you've gotten some feedback, and feedback being what we just discussed, and also if we need to push it back to make sure that we've got a good comprehensive look at this. So if there's not any other questions or comments, yes, TJ, sorry, yes.
Christina, go ahead.
I think that was Diane.
Yeah, Diane.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Christina and Raymond, I was just wondering, because, you know, I think we've had these conversations before with Michael Morris. Would there be any benefit to bringing COG in as well?
I think after we look at the possibilities as a whole, there very well could be an ask that we might have. Truly, the two agencies working together provides many regional benefits. It's probably just identifying what is the right project that provides the most regional benefit that would be something that COG would want to fund. I think the other thing, and Raymond mentioned it too, is there could be ample opportunity for some federal funding for some of these projects. The federal eligibility of different grants, when they look at competitiveness of proposals that are submitted by different transit agencies, one of the things they look at is collaboration between multiple transit agencies. So clearly, we have some great collaboration between our two agencies, and then collaboration with the Council of Governments could really help us have some competitive projects for federal funding.
Thank
and
you.
I'm glad that there's regional significance in this project that's more than just having DART operate out of a joint facility. It really improves the efficiency of service delivery. There's opportunities for all of us to reduce cost and integrate our rail services, reduce the cost of procurement. Just a lot of opportunity that I think the RTC would look on favorably as a regional project.
Thank you.
Board Member Gilmore?
So staff, I've seen and heard a lot of different ideas for Carrollton and downtown. What is that looking like? Where are we as far as that connection goes? Because my understanding is they're pretty far along in that process for a redesign for the Silver Line.
Yes, Christina, if you're okay, I'll take this one. All right, thank you. DART's program, obviously they have a schedule, they have a budget. They were working to accomplish that. It did not include at that time DCTA and the timing of DCTA coming in. We did have quite a few conversations about making sure that future plans, there was an opportunity to put in a station and station design. And we've briefed the board on that in the past, I'd say last year or sometime. But this really opens up a lot of opportunity for us to rethink that. There's some engineering and design opportunities that might need to be reshaped or rethought with this joint operating facility. No disagreement that DART's already very far along in their design, but that's one of the conversations that we want to have with them next week. We've had a couple of conversations with them about, hey, now that we're looking at this, it might be worthwhile taking another look at the Carrollton, I'll just call it the Carrollton interchange. I can't really say at this time that we've had any significant conversation with DART about their interest in looking at opportunities for Carrollton. I do believe they exist. I've talked to Vice Chair Gilmore about it. He's mentioned that there might be some interest from the city of Carrollton to relook at things. So we'll have to revisit that with DART and see where they are with the project.
So we have no foothold or no planned foothold down there?
Not
For
currently.
want of a better term.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I hope those conversations go well because I would like to see a platform or some sort of interconnection down there.
We have planned an area for a station, but it kind of tees into the it tees into the Silver Line. It's not integrated into a shared platform at this point. I don't know if there's an opportunity for us to share a platform, much like we did at Trinity Mills. But that's one of the things we want to talk to them about is, does it make sense for DCTA to have to acquire the land and move infrastructure around, build a a platform that's by and large right under the green line elevated track, and then have people disembark and walk across, maybe a couple of 100 feet to get to the station? Or is there a more elegant design where we share a station? And that's what we want to talk to them about.
But that first one you're talking about is not even on the table either, right? I mean,
Well,
it's an idea, but nobody's talking with DART about it at this point.
No, we have talked to DART about it. I apologize if maybe I didn't understand the question. Their engineering and design team has looked at it. They have facilitated the concept of DART, of DCTA coming into DART's platform area. So
Raymond, let me interrupt you just for a second. I want to make sure that, because I know the agenda posting is for the interlocal agreement for the joint maintenance facility. So I just want to make sure that we're not steering too far off because we're talking about some future discussions so Joe, help me with some guidance on that.
I was given a little leeway because I know a lot of stuff relates to the O&M facility. So Raymond, if you can kind of keep it related back to the O&M facility, that'd be great.
Okay. Well, I've said, I think, what I wanted to say, which is
That's
there
fine.
has been, but both sides have looked at it, and there is an intent, and there's been conversations with DART's board about a future opportunity to locate a facility.
I just, if we're going to get into this O&M facility as far as we can, I would like to make sure that we're having and exploring every other opportunity on the other side. I know it's a great benefit for them. I know it's somewhat of a benefit for us. But if there's an opportunity to get a little bit more direction on that other end, that'd be great.
Thank you for the feedback.
So in the future, if we put this off till May, let's include in the caption when we talk about the O&M, it broad enough to where we can also talk about, and how future discussions and future plans incorporate into that, so that it's more of a comprehensive discussion. Yeah.
Will do.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. You bet. Any other questions or comments on that? All right, we'll move on then to agenda item 6, which is discuss and provide staff direction regarding the status of DCTA and Trinity Metro's partnership for joint bus operations and maintenance.
Thank you. Hopefully my sound is better now. Thank goodness for IT support. You can find information in your packet starting on page 345. So as the board is aware, staff has been providing monthly updates to the board on the partnership exploration with Trinity Metro for joint bus operations and maintenance. Over the past couple of months, staff has continued to meet with Trinity Metro and explore the various components of that partnership. But we have yet to determine whether or not moving in the direction of Trinity Metro's LGC, which is MATS, is really the best solution for the management, operations, and maintenance efficiencies that we were seeking. We still feel that there would be value in continuing to map out like organization structure as well as price to kind of really determine if that partnership meets both agencies' needs. But we also think that there would be benefit to potentially partnering with Trinity Metro via an ILA for the same purpose. And so if you'll refer back to that original letter of intent, it wasn't just the LGC that we wanted to explore. There were other avenues that we felt might be advantageous for both agencies. In parallel to working with Trinity Metro and kind of exploring those options, staff has also been, kind of throwing out the idea of potentially developing an RFP to fully turnkey the entire bus operations function. So we're definitely looking at all of the different options. While the turnkey RFP would certainly have a longer implementation timeframe, it could still be a beneficial path to explore. I think it is important to note that any deviation to the timing associated with our exploration with Trinity Metro does not impact the other priority actions that we have been reporting on a monthly basis to the board. And we have provided an updated priority actions flowchart on page 474 of your packet, just as a reference point. But at this point, I'd like to pass it over to Raymond because I know that he has additional insight. He's been having conversations with Trinity Metro's CEO, and I am sure that he has some additional updates and insight to provide.
And after Raymond, I'd like to share some of the conversations that I've had.
Certainly.
And again, thank you, Nicole. Yeah, I'm off mute. Sometimes I forget to unmute myself, so. The conversations have gone well with Trinity Metro. I kind of break it up into a couple of different swim lanes, if you will. One is we've been working with their chief operating officer and their staff to look at the multiple opportunities that we have around procuring equipment, processing of payments, and different opportunities that we have to lower our cost of operations. We've successfully have done that with DART. We have an existing interlocal agreement with Trinity Metro today. And ultimately, what we're trying to determine is what, in a future state, if we were to collaborate with Trinity Metro, what would the structure look like? What would the cost be for licensing technology? What would the staff alignment look like from both sides, and how that collaboration would work? And that's one stream of effort that we're progressing on with the Trinity Metro staff. The other, as was defined by the interlocal agreement, is what does the relationship look like between the two entities? Are we going to set up, they had proposed setting up a local government corp. We obviously have a local government corp. And how that is defined, who serves on it, the governance, if you will, of the relationship between the two agencies. And as was clearly defined in our letter of intent, is that we were going to explore multiple options, including ILAs and LGCs. And as you know, as we've communicated with you and have had Trinity Metro brief the board, we reached I think a difference of approach on the construct of their local government corp, how they wanted to see it governed and managed. I believe it's not consistent with how our board has viewed the local government corp. I'm not here to suggest that one is better than the other, that there's just differences between the approach. So the conversation that I had yesterday with their CEO is that we still believe that both agencies can benefit significantly by continuing to look at a joint or opportunities for joint operations. But it may actually be more beneficial to look at an interlocal agreement, because it is a arm's length agreement, a contracting method that is well understood and used by agencies to engage in business. So that's where we are. No decisions have been made. We're still in the exploratory area. And what I'm proposing that we do is continue the course. We're planning to bring back to this board a well-organized presentation around how we would eventually see, if we decide to do business with Trinity Metro, how we would see it set up organizationally, what the benefits are, what it would cost for us to operate, and really try to determine at that point, is there enough benefit in continuing on this path? So that's where we are with the discussions with Trinity Metro. Now I'll turn it over to you, Board Chair.
Yes. Yeah. I think y'all received a letter that was sent to me by the board chair of Trinity Metro sometime last week, I believe. So I called Jeff in response to that letter. And so I mean, I must say, and we had a great conversation. It was a good conversation to clear up some things, but this is sort of my take from the conversation that I had with them. And so I'm going to share with you what my ideas are about moving forward in this particular vein. I know that as a board, we had not really, the conversations that were going on between the two staffs, we really didn't know too much about. We got briefed on what some of the details were, and we got the letter of intent. But that letter that was sent made it perfectly clear that when, I believe it was Board Member Gilmore, when you brought up, hey, don't we want some type of board representation on the MATS board? I mean, it was just a comment that you made, and it was a concern that you had and a suggestion that you had. Well, that must have really either caught people off guard or something. But anyway, y'all saw the letter. And the letter, I mean, I expressed my concern about the tone of the letter and about what the letter was saying. And what I took from it was the letter was saying, if you want board representation, we can't move forward with this. But during the conversation, what I realized as we explored the interests of both the agencies is that the interests of Trinity Metro for this MATS was primarily the whole intent was to do the collective bargaining agreement. And I've learned later on to maybe house the human resources. And make a long story short, after that conversation, I think because we're moving away from a fixed bus route right now, as far as on our Denton Connect and Louisville and Highland Village, we're exploring that through the VIA proposal. When I look at some of it, either the uncertainty or I don't want to say the lack of detail in what everybody's wanting to achieve from a bus operations perspective, including the negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement, I have found, at least in my service at the city, that when you have an ILA, your relationship, as is our relationship with UNT, is defined by the contract, by the four corners of the contract. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have disputes, but and that makes it really clean. And so I don't mind exploring some of these other ideas about procurement and all that, but my conversation with the board chair, those were secondary, at least for right now, to getting the mat set up for the collective bargaining and the human resources. And so once I understood that, well, I understood why they might have had an issue with board representation and things such as that. So for me, I certainly would say staff continue on to see, we certainly want to see if there's some cost benefit to this. But when it comes to bus operations and being involved in the MAT, and if that's really what the primary purpose of the MAT is in its original inception, gosh, I would just assume see, well, what would it cost turnkey? And then we can use that to evaluate if we were to get involved. Because I'll be quite honest, I was really surprised at, and I shared this, I'm not sharing anything that I didn't share on the phone, and I'm not breaching any confidentiality. That I was surprised that I had such a misunderstanding, or there was some disconnect somewhere in this conversation, because when I shared with him that when the presentation was made to our board from the Trinity Metro representative, there were several, and I went back and looked at the presentation, there were several factors and several bullet points on what the MAT was supposed to do. And one of them was the collective bargaining agreement. But that letter, together with the conversation, really clarified that that right now is really the original intent and purpose was to do that. And so I think in some ways we almost have to reset the conversation to say, hey, maybe not reset it, but add this ILA maybe a little bit closer to the top of the list to try to say, well, what do we need to do? I mean, what do we need to do if, because it may be we may only have routes 3 and 7, and it may be that we don't have routes 3 and 7, depending on, how the proposals go and the data pans out. So those are my thoughts. I just wanted to give you a reflection and a briefing on the conversation. It was pleasant. I did express some concern about the letter, but it was received with grace and it was all good. I just was glad to get some clarity on what the intent of the MAT was originally, because I didn't get it. And I don't think this board got it. And so I certainly said, look, our board has had one presentation from your staff, and in no way did this get communicated. So that's sort of where I see it. And I agree with you, Raymond, that, can we continue the conversations? Yes, but I think also it seems based upon our collective bargaining negotiations that are coming up, that time is of the essence regarding at least this component of it. If we're going to do an ILA, we need to really, I think the board needs to give some direction fairly quickly, either to do that or not do that, so that staff has some direction and so that they can communicate that to Trinity Metro, because that's going to require a lot of data gathering and, involving our legal counsel and things such as that. So we've got sort of a time issue, but also, a functionality issue. Comments? Yes.
Yes, if you don't mind, just to follow up. So thank you for that. I completely agree with the conversations. They're consistent with the conversation that I had with the Trinity Metro CEO yesterday. I think there's still interest, and we should continue to explore the opportunities. If nothing else, just having more data and information is valuable. We have another agenda item to kind of brief the board on where we are with the negotiations that Nicole will talk about, that NTMC needs to manage moving forward. But I think that we can continue on that path. We have other opportunities to look at different approaches to improving our efficiency as an agency. And so I think that if the board would consider to allow DCTA to continue to move forward with Trinity Metro and explorations through an interlocal agreement and not focus so much on the local government corp, that we can still come back to the board with better information moving forward.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because they basically said, if you want board representation as a board member and not DCTA staff, they were out. So I think that forecloses that particular path. Board Member Gilmore, do you have a question or comment?
I did. And you know, they've got tremendous depth as far as bus service and history in this. So I really appreciate the opportunity to work with them in that capacity. So I'm okay if, you know, this, I mean, effectively this looks like, to me, it's making this a turnkey contract and allowing Matt's to go ahead and be our face, if you will. So that, and am I correct in that view?
Yes, I think it's in the intent of Trinity Metro to go ahead and stand up the local government corp and move staff and all those things. So they would have a local government corp. We would have an agreement with Trinity Metro, and they would operate their government corp just like we've been operating our local government corp.
So with that there, does that mean that we need to step away from current negotiations with our LGC so that it can be handed off to their LGC? How, and if Joe, if I'm stepping too far, you let me know here.
Get off mute there. It's outside the topic that we have posted, but just to answer your questions, it's just to quickly answer that question. We just can't just hold off on the negotiations that we've already started. We have some time constraints, but there are ways to manage that.
Nicole, do you want to more directly answer the question about the negotiation? Because I agree, it's imperative. We have to, you know, through the North Texas Mobility.
Well, and Raymond, since it's off topic, Joe, I mean, Joe's being very clear. I think we really need to see a transition plan as the board as kind of a next step.
All right, very good.
So quick question on that. Joe, just to get some clarity on your finding. Because we're talking about for joint bus operations and maintenance, is the collective bargaining agreement, would that not be sort of under the umbrella of bus operations? In other words, is it or is it so different because of just the nature of it that it would be sort of excluded from bus operations because it's more personnel?
The topic bus operations and putting the collective bargaining agreement and discussing that under here really would not give somebody notice if they looked at our agenda that we were going to be discussing that collective bargaining
Gotcha.
agreement.
Okay, good. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. That's helpful. Excuse the dog barking. I think he's got some type of dementia or something, but he'll settle down. Okay. Any other comments? Any comments, questions? Is the board okay with sort of what's been described as the path forward, the direction forward, moving in that direction and in those discussions?
Yeah, I think my only concern has been addressed. So
okay,
for next time.
All right, I see no.
I think Diane has her hand raised.
Oh, I didn't see it. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
Oh, that's okay. I am in agreement with them moving forward. I do want to say, just because I want to know, I want the board to understand kind of what was happening in the earlier discussions, when we were discussing some of these items with Trinity Metro. I just want the board to know that at that time, there was a discussion about board members sitting on. Yeah, so that obviously something changed, and that's fine. We need to know what we're getting into. But I'm certainly open to staff continuing discussion where they see it would be whatever benefits DCTA.
Okay, all right.
Well, and from a staff perspective, I think we could make some considerable progress between now and the standard April board meeting so that we could provide more information to the board at that point.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Staff, do you have enough discussion and direction to move forward and with confidence?
Yes, thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
your guidance and input.
Okay, great. All right, then we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is review and discuss MOS service plan update and considerations.
Thank you. Well, I am super excited to report that we're making exceptional progress with the MOS service plan. And I would like to thank all of the board members for their attendance in the roundtables that were scheduled, because I think they were extremely productive. So we have completed all 3 of the member city roundtables. The last one with Louisville was this past Monday. And VIA is working really quickly to review all of the feedback and modify those service plans in accordance with the feedback that was received. Accenture has also compiled the feedback from all of the roundtables, and that I will kind of turn it over to Chris after I provide my update, if he would like to go over that. But we have included that in the PowerPoint. I can also, if the board would like, we can send that out separately via email so that you don't have to look through the whole PowerPoint to get that information. On the PowerPoint, I did want to brief the board just on a few items other than the completion of the roundtables. So staff is still working on coordinating that special called board meeting the week of April 5th. I believe that it has been scheduled for April 7th, but Lindsay can confirm. And then the whole purpose of that meeting is really solely centered around MOS. So like I said, approving kind of that updated proposed service plan and maybe what some of those future phases are is going to be paramount in how we determine the task order and the task order amount, as well as what's taken to the public. And then we will also be bringing back a fair policy recommendation to the board. Obviously, the on-demand service currently does not follow our existing fare structure. If it is the board's decision to make it a different fare for the cost of that on-demand service, then that is something that the FTA does require that we take to the public. So we are meeting with VIA's fare structure team. They have a fare structure team. So we'll be meeting with them next week to kind of talk about use cases and what other transit agencies have done and looking at how that would work and integrate with our existing fare structure and the services that would be remaining as we transition from fixed route to on demand. And so we'll be bringing back a recommendation to the board at that early April meeting specifically for that purpose. As you'll also see, I've provided just kind of a snapshot of timing, all working toward an official launch of on-demand service on September 6th, which is a Monday. We feel very confident, and when I say we, myself, Accenture, as well as VIA, that these are all completely reasonable dates for us to do this and do it very well. So we're really excited about that. If you'll go to the next slide, and this, I apologize, this may be very difficult to read, so I will send Lindsay a PDF of this so that she can send it to the board. But I did kind of just put together a timeline that shows overall progression of the entire project. Because I know at board meetings, we kind of focus in on what's happening right here and right now. And I wanted to kind of give everybody, a 30,000 view, a 30,000 foot view of where we're going. So if all goes according to plan, like I said, we'll launch that on-demand service on Monday, September 6th. But I've also included what we have been talking about as phase 2, which would be the access portion of the plan. Some of that timing probably needs to be adjusted, but I feel like it's relatively reasonable, so that you can see that once we launch that first phase, which is that core service plan, that we would kind of just take our next step into looking at phase 2 and how we implement that, and the public involvement process associated with that. So again, we will refine this, we will update this. I can provide this on a monthly basis to the board. VIA is also they're using this as kind of their basis, and they're going to come back with kind of more specific dates within this overall time frame, so that you'll have a high level view as well as a more detailed view. And so that's something that I anticipate having ready either for the early April meeting or for the standard April meeting. On the next 3 slides, I'm not going to go over them in detail unless the board has questions. Chris can also answer questions, but this is where we have kind of captured all of the feedback from the roundtables. And so you do have that in your PowerPoint presentation. This is the feedback that we reviewed with VIA. We had a meeting with them yesterday to just make sure that they captured everything that we sent. We also sent them feedback that we captured during each meeting and that we debriefed with each individual roundtable just to make sure that they had everything that they needed. Right now, DCTA is working on some data metrics that we're going to pull together in the next week and send to VIA that they'll need for the revision of proposal number 4. So everything is making really great momentum. I would like to call attention to pages 351 and 352 of your packet. So obviously, I think, when Accenture provided their original analysis, they had kind of said, hey, there are a list of considerations. And we've been talking a lot about what are the FTA requirements? Like those are the considerations that we've really been digging in deep. But much like I talked about the fare structure, there are other items that we really kind of need to uncover and investigate and bring back a recommended plan to the board. And so on pages 351 and 352 of your packet, that is the list that staff has compiled to date. And we just really want to make sure that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and like I said, making sure that we're ushering this new service plan into a launch date very successfully. And that requires kind of doing all the homework along the way. So we'll continue to provide this document to the board every single month. My hope is that we're able to kind of fill out the findings and that we find that, our plan moving forward is going to work great. But there will be instances, again, like the fare structure, that we will have to kind of bring something specific back to the board to say we really need to make a decision on this individual component in order to move forward. So at that point, that's kind of an update. Like I said, we're making really great progress. I'm really excited about this. I think, as I've been talking to Kittleson and VIA about the public involvement process, we've got some really great ideas for, how we can showcase this on-demand service to the public to really get rich feedback in return. So that is my update. I'm happy to answer any questions or, assist with any discussion within the board.
Sure, I have just a couple. So to make sure I understand what the process is moving forward, the aspiration is in the special called board meeting in April the 7th, that we have the data that we need as a board to make a decision on what type of service plan or those options, those menu options that we want to engage VIA with. Is that correct? Is that the plan?
Yes, sir, as well as the associated cost.
Okay. So then the list of questions that you just mentioned, I think is on 350 and 351. I think, sort of these bullet point kind of inquiries or fact finding. So then those questions or that information will be completed, or is it the intent to have all those answers by the April 7th board meeting?
So we will prioritize the ones that need to be answered in order for us to move forward with our plan for the April 7th board meeting. Some of those items are things that are going to take several months for us to uncover and will not impact what we need to take to the public or the contract that we have with VIA.
Okay, and if once you identify those, if you could just send that out in an email to the board to say, okay, here's all these lists of questions. These are the ones that we think are absolutely necessary for the April 7th. I don't know why I keep losing video feed. The April 7th meeting, so that if a board member believes that, well, this piece of information might be helpful, they can at least engage in some conversation prior to that. And it will make that meeting much, because there's going to need, I thought I read somewhere, somebody said, oh, this will only take about an hour, hour and a half. This special called board meeting is going to be very comprehensive. And so that's sort of what my expectation is, because if we're going to be voting on, this is what we think we want to do based upon, because I think we still have to have the public input after that, correct? Yes.
Correct. So you would be voting on basically a final proposed service plan,
Yes.
and take to the public, but you cannot formally adopt the service plan until you have the Title VI analysis and all of the public feedback to review,
Yeah.
which is slated for July.
What I don't want to happen is we get to the April 7th meeting and somehow there's board members that feel like that they need some additional information that's critical, because there's a lot of moving parts here, and that's not a criticism or an admonition. It's just more like, I think this is probably one of the more important meetings. I mean, all of our board meetings are important, obviously, but this is really the crux of a lot of work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. And I just want to ensure that what we have and what we need to make that decision, we recognize it. It doesn't mean we don't know what we don't know. But this will be an important meeting for the agency and for our member city communities.
Absolutely. We have recommended that meeting be a minimum of 3 hours.
Okay.
But I will also say that we're a step ahead of you. I've already had a conversation with both Accenture and VIA about the fact that we need to make sure that this packet has every piece of information, that it is very clearly outlined in order to expect the board to make a decision.
Yep.
So,
Fantastic.
so we're ahead of you.
Fantastic. Most people are. So, yeah. Okay. Other comments, questions, observations? And then I believe, Chris, do you have if there's not, we'll move forward, but if there are, TJ, did you have some questions or comments?
TJ and Christina.
You just decided to put a standing TJ have questions at every item.
No,
right?
I thought I saw you reach for something, and so I didn't know if you raised your hand or not.
And I may have missed this. So when are we? Did I miss the FTA conversation?
So we have had an initial conversation with FTA regarding funding, as well as like we've briefly talked about like fleet requirements, like spare ratio requirements, and then obviously the public involvement process. That is going to require several follow-up discussions, but we have had the initial conversation.
What I worry about is something popping up on that then impacts what we're telling the public. And I can't have that. I need to have clarity on the FTA before the funding, before we start walking this out to the public, because if I have to walk something back in there's no bueno for any of us.
Absolutely.
So, okay, I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And just a quick reminder, did we decide if 3 and 7, are we going to run those for 6 months, or was it for a full year?
So VIA's recommendation is to run them for 6 months. However, we have vocalized that if data, like we'll provide data on a monthly basis on that particular A/B test. And if data, say 2-3 months in is overwhelming one way or the other, we would bring that back to the board to see, do you want to continue that A/B testing, or do you want to make a decision at this point? But VIA's recommendation is that we do it for 6 months.
Okay. And we are committed to manually collecting ridership data for that period of time, and the drivers are aware of that, correct? Or will be?
We will deploy some surveying. It would not be for every single day for that entire 6-month period of time. We would do some surveying, but I know that we have had conversations internally about particularly the determining if folks are riding because they're affiliated with UNT or not. So we still need to vet that fully out, but the plan is to have at least enough surveying done on those particular routes that we would have accurate data to share with the board.
Is there something specific that makes it difficult to collect hourly ridership data for a week or two from our drivers?
We don't have any technology that would do that.
No, but we do collect every day. They're collecting ridership information, so that's
Correct, but not by stop and not by time.
And I understand that we don't have a technology solution for that, but I know that this is burdensome, but for a week to do it via paper, I mean,
typically what we do in transit is we'll bring in a third party. They'll ride the vehicles. We're not asking the driver because they need to focus on doing their job and driving and just doing their job. But we can bring in third party staff. It's standard operating procedure. They'll ride the vehicles. They'll take literally on and offs at stops. That's going to be their job, and we'll collect that data. It's manual, but it's actually considered a standard acceptable industry practice because not everybody has automatic passenger counters or automatic fare boxes. So that's how it's typically done.
Correct. It just would not be for the entire 6-month period of time.
no, and I get doing a sample and trying to figure that out.
Absolutely. So. Yes. The plan is to do sampling in order to have accurate data or at least a educated estimate to kind of bring back to the board and share that information.
Yeah, well, some of my educational background is statistical analysis, so I get it. But that to me is, I think that's critically important for us to be able to make that decision. And of course, the other component there that you mentioned, which was UNT versus residential data, I think is important there. So, okay. And then I did have a quick question on the A-train replacement service in this. I think that expanding it to Sunday was actually in base scenario 2. So with Sundays and holidays, I think it was. If we could maybe come back and get some clarity on that for the A-train replacement service and where it actually is and what we're actually proposing, because I'm a little confused on that.
So the A-train replacement, the way it was presented during the roundtables would be for Sunday only, since that is.
I understand that in the roundtables it was different. Is what I think is what I'm saying here is that in the roundtables we discussed it as adding it as a separate, but it's already been presented to us as part of the base scenario 2, I think.
Yes, that was part of the discussion. I believe we asked VIA to kind of pull that out and show that as even though it's in the base, what is the cost of that service?
Okay.
So that we can determine, well, should we do that or should we add a pocket of one of the service areas that's not currently planned? And I think that was part of the final discussion.
Okay.
Check with VIA, just so even if it was part of the base, what is the cost of that service, additional service, so that we know specifically how we might trade that off with something else that we might want to do.
And part of proposal number 4 and the direction that we've provided to VIA based on feedback that we've received kind of along the way is really identifying price per service or per a la carte. So the base is going to be kind of that Monday through Sunday, the 2 zones. Here are all of the operating parameters and here's the cost. And then anything extra that we've talked about is basically going to be line itemed out that says, if you want this component, it's going to cost this.
Cool.
That way there isn't kind of commingling of cost that we then have to pull out and say, well, when was that presented and how was it presented?
Okay. And then two quick ones. You all are, as part of that big conversation, will you be bringing recommendations on proposed fares?
Yes, in early April, we will be.
And have you got any inkling on whether the FTA is giving us any impact as far as funding goes for going to a full on-demand?
So the initial conversation is that because of COVID, there is kind of, they're being a little bit more lenient than they typically have been, at least over the next 2 years, which would give some time for our agency or agencies at large to kind of, go to DC and talk about the actual formulas that are used. The other conversation is that because we would be operating less than 50 vehicles, there are certain FTA requirements that might not apply, that we would not have to check off the box.
50 fixed route vehicles, yeah.
Are correct for fixed route. So I think from a funding perspective, we feel like we've got a pretty good window, but we would feel more confident in having some additional conversations with the FTA to kind of ensure that we know the implications. And so certainly those are conversations that would be had, that we would have some more insight to share at that early April board meeting. And I don't know, Marissa, if you kind of want to share any additional thoughts from your perspective as part of that conversation.
Sure. So, I mean, as a portion of the formula funding, a portion of that formula itself relates to fixed route. So, so we do believe if we reduce fixed route service, it will reduce a portion of our formula funding. The question is still how much, and then if there are additional funding opportunities we would have under the demand response component of our service that could potentially make up for some of that. And so, as Nicole said, we've had an initial conversation just to talk conceptually about it. And then we're looking internally to kind of recalculate that formula under the assumptions for the proposed service changes to see how that would impact our formula funding.
And there's a bit of a challenge when you work with not just the FTA, but any branch of the federal government. They tend to not, they don't give you necessarily the specifics on how to do it. They're more of an enforcement policy board, so they'll give you suggestions. We just have a lot of work to do to really get it down to a calculation. And to Marissa's point, DCTA is not the only agency that's dealing with this. I know DART's planning on moving a lot more service to this same type of concept. Trinity Metro is adding zip zones. And so there needs to be a continuous communication at a federal level with the folks that actually develop these formulas. And I think they feel the pressure and understand that while this is more effective and more efficient, it's making it more challenging for agencies to abide by the way the rules are set up now. I will say in conversations that we've had with DART and with the FTA that there is appears to be opportunity to still continue to get federal funds. But to Marissa's point, it's a shift from fixed route to on demand, and how will that impact the ultimate formula? And it is a very complicated formula. So we still have some work to do.
Any other questions or comments? I've got a couple, but wanted to make the rounds. All right. I want to go back to a sentiment that Board Member Gilmore shared, and that is, I know that the collection of ridership data is burdensome. But so a couple of things. What we're trying to accomplish with this pilot program is to determine whether we keep routes 3 or 7 or whether we transition over to VIA. And to make that decision, we're going to need some really accurate data. Surveys are good, but they're not going to give us the data that we need to make that decision. So first question is, if we put third-party individuals on the routes, is this already DCTA staff? Are these people that we're hiring from the outside?
So we utilize brand ambassadors to help in all sorts of aspects, right? Because we have a small team. So we would anticipate hiring brand ambassadors for a period of time. My guess is probably something like 6 weeks, covering several days each of those 6 weeks. And they would be tracking the information that we would ask them to track.
And what typically does that cost us to do that? Do we know? I mean,
I would say it's anywhere between no more than $28 an hour for one person.
okay.
That's an all-encompassing cost.
Let me just say, we will commit to getting an appropriate amount of data. I completely agree. This is too important for us to not do well, and we will commit to getting the appropriate amount of ridership data. I'm concerned about just doing it over a 2-week time frame and not to take us off on a tangent.
Well, I thought she said 6 weeks.
We would do it over at least a 6-week period of time.
Yeah, but I'd like to also take it over several months during that. It's not a contiguous 6 weeks because there's seasonality changes. We're going to be taking this ridership if things work out the way they are. School's not going to be in service for sure. So it'll give us a real good opportunity to understand like what is the actual service that we're providing patrons that ride the Connect service. What does that actually look like? It won't necessarily show the demand when school is in because there's obviously students that have used it in the past. So I just want to make sure that we do a comprehensive job of looking at ridership. We can use brand ambassadors. The industry also has entities that understand how to take statistically valid samples that know this is their job to do this on behalf of transit agencies so that we know that it's statistically valid and it meets the FTA's requirements for ridership. So we have a couple of options. We'll commit to making sure that we do a very good job of bringing back relevant data to this board.
Yeah, so two comments to that. One is I don't think that the ridership data per stop is really what we're looking for. I mean, I think we're just looking for how many people are riding Route 7 and how many people are riding Route 3. I guess if you want to do it by stop, but it's really more if they're all getting off at one stop, you still have a number of people that might exceed what you would think on demand would. So, and secondly, if you could, when you decide on the option of how you're going to gather this data, just be sure and forward that plan to the board, because I just want people to have an opportunity that if they agree with it, great. If they have some suggestions or if they think, no, this won't do it, that staff is aware of that before we get to the April 7th board meeting. Because this is, I mean, we've asked both VIA for the cost of Route 3 and 7 if they took it over, which they provided. We've also got the cost for DCTA on what it's costing on routes 3 or 7. I think we do. I think that was sent to me. There's something that I'm still waiting on.
We still owe it to you, but I'm going to get it to you tomorrow.
Oh, okay. And sort of going along with that, I think it would be helpful. So I don't know if we've really seen it. We probably have, but it's been in the past when we did the cost analysis on the bus routes through our study. If we could look at the routes that we're eliminating, the routes that were proposed to go to on demand, I think that's what routes 1 through, I don't know what they are, of the Connect, all of them but routes 3 or 7, to see back in 2019 pre-COVID, what was the cost, the total cost of that bus service. And you could do it for Denton, you could do it for Louisville, because Louisville's got a couple bus routes, so that we can say, okay, we're replacing these routes that cost us this much with this and it's just really succinct. It's really side by side, and you might have already done that and I might have missed it, but
I think we have a presentation that we presented midsummer last year that has a lot of that data.
Yes.
And that's where I was going to be pulling the cost of routes 3 and 7. So while I go in there and pull that tomorrow, let me see what I can pull, because I might be able to provide some information as early as tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
But let me go back and look.
Sure. Fantastic. All right. Any other questions? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry,
I will
Nicole.
say that as from a planning perspective, that on the Outlook, the agenda Outlook, we would absolutely, I mean, because we recognize how critical this is, we would absolutely, the month before we were going to implement any sort of surveying or data collection, however you want to describe it, before we would do that, I would feel more comfortable bringing kind of the entire plan and the data points that we would be collecting to the board so that we could have that discussion, we could get board impact, because the last thing that we want to do is provide results to the board and then the board say, well, why didn't you ask this question? So making sure that we're all on the same page before we implement any sort of, you know, contractors on our vehicles for that purpose would be key.
Okay, well, so then that raises the question of, and I appreciate that, and I agree with that. But our next board meeting is the special called board meeting. So I thought I'd heard you say that, well, we'd want to bring this before the board to get feedback before we do it, but we don't really have a board meeting in between there. So how do you propose to do that?
So I would actually recommend that we don't start collecting that data until we are truly A/B testing. Because
until we are doing what?
Until we're doing the A/B testing where we're running both on demand and fixed route at the same time.
Yes, I agree.
So that if for the sake of the conversation, that would start in September.
Gotcha.
So that we can have a conversation in like July or August with the board about the data that would be collected and how we would plan to do that. So that would kind of, from a timing perspective, that would be our plan.
That is it. Yeah, and that's just my brain. Is that sort of the rest of the board members' understanding that surveying would have been? Yeah, that's just me having an electronic brain glitch. So I appreciate that.
It's okay. It happens. It happens to us.
Yes. Connie, I saw you sort of buzz in. Do you have a comment or question?
I do have a question. Thank you. My concern is that on this Title VI thing, and I may just have missed something, but I worry about how we're reaching all of these people who is the reason we get a lot of federal funding is for the lower income people, and how we're reaching some of those people to understand the impact on them. I mean, they're not necessarily the people that are going to do an online survey or they're, you know.
Sure. So for the public involvement process, because this is such a huge change, that is why we have the task order that was just approved with Kittleson, is so that we truly can have a boots on the ground approach. We anticipate, I mean, like I said, we have a network of folks that we can reach out to that can help amplify the information that we would need to collect from a digital perspective. But there is a really huge component of this public involvement process that is kind of face-to-face or through a virtual, meeting, where we would actually be walking people through the plan, talking to them about the impacts that are specific to them in order for us to kind of collect that feedback in real time. So there are multiple pieces to how we conduct this outreach, and the digital portion is just one.
And it includes outreach to social services
I mean, absolutely. Like I said, we have a core network of people that in our traditional public involvement process that help us distribute that information. And the social service agencies are actually a committee amongst themselves.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anybody else? One follow-up to the testing in September. How are we going to have a base level to know what the difference is? In other words, we need to have some way of measuring the ridership pilot program so that we understand what the impact has been on the on-demand. So that's my only thought there.
So, I mean, we would be using our standard monthly ridership that we currently collect. We should be able to see, I mean, it should be pretty visible if numbers start to drop and then those numbers are showing up on the on-demand side.
We can also do a pre and post. There's no issue, I think, in having the same firm that's going to collect the data during to do it prior to.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, and I don't know, I guess maybe I still don't have a clear understanding of how we're collecting data now. I know that the bus drivers do it manually with a tick mark, but I don't think they do every one, or I just don't know how they do it, which is fine. It may be exactly what is appropriate and what would satisfy, but I'll leave that up to you guys. It's just, I think we do need a base level to be able to compare it to however that data is acquired.
Yeah, my only concern in doing something pre-September is that UNT is out of school. And so you would see the absence of our student passengers if we did any sort of data collection in the summer months.
Okay, well, we're in March right now, so I guess they get out of school when, in May?
In May.
Yeah. Well, but they're not keeping, currently they're keeping ridership data, but they're not distinguishing between, I mean, does the UNT student have to show an ID?
Correct. So they show an ID to board, and when they board, they are a tick mark.
Okay, so we are collecting right now ridership data for 3 and 7 on how many students are riding on some type of basis.
There's not a difference between a student and a non-student. So our operator collects general boarding tick marks. Their reporting does not differentiate between the type of passenger.
Oh, I thought you said they had to show an ID.
Well, they do, but when the operator is tracking that boarding, they don't differentiate that as a student versus a non-student.
Okay, so I appreciate that. How difficult would it be then that there's just one other category? I mean, I presume they just put a tick mark down and these are just all the people. Whereas if it's a student, it just goes in a different, it just goes off to the side. I mean, so I would just encourage you that if there's a way to, if they have to show an ID, that's the reason I asked it. If they don't have to show an ID, then I would not want, that's implementing a whole new policy and procedure. Would not want to suggest that. But if they're required to show an ID, because that means they're riding for free based upon their contract, I think we could probably capture that in a way that is not burdensome to the driver, but would give us really critical data, because it's March, spring break's here. We've got a couple months that we'd have some really good data. So I throw that out there just as an observation.
Let me see what we could do. Maybe we could for, the month of April, and that would give us a week or so to kind of, train operators. Let me see what the feasibility of doing something like that.
Absolutely.
To kind of capture that would be, and then I could provide a report back to the board once we kind of have a certain.
That's wonderful. I appreciate that. Any other questions for Nicole on this? Yes, TJ. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I want to go back to the conversation, and I'm sorry, I got a little confused. So is the FTA saying that we're going to lose money or not? I heard two different takes on that from Marissa and Nicole.
Because the formula, a portion of the formula is based on fixed route service. If we reduce fixed route service, it will reduce our formula funding associated with that component.
Okay, and we'll have an estimate of what that is?
Based on the various scenarios that we're looking at, yes. So we'll look at what it would look like if we have 3 and 7 still intact versus moving those to demand response as well. And then the question becomes, to Raymond's point, if there's additional funding that we could get on the fixed route side, since we're switching to a fixed route service.
And then Marissa, to clarify, the FTA did state that the next 2 years of funding would be based on the 2019 data that had been provided. So it kind of gives us we have a bit of a reprieve over the next 2 years, which would give us potentially some time to address it at a federal level regarding how the formula is determined.
Okay.
Yes, and the 2 years is mainly because FTA does not want to see transit agencies lose funding because of COVID, because it still takes almost the same amount of money to operate a transit agency, whether you have an increase in ridership or not. So they didn't want to see transit agencies lose the funding. So for the next 2 years, as Nicole and Marissa have mentioned, will be held to the formula funds as allocated in FY 2019 as far as our ridership. And as a staff initiative, that we will make sure that we continue to work with FTA as well as those in DC that make the decisions about the formula funds. I mean, it will be a heavy lift, but I think that getting the American Public Transportation Association engaged in the conversation, because there are many transit agencies that are shifting some of their service to different modes, which then makes the way we report through what's called NTD a very outdated model, because it's not keeping up with the times of the evolving transit models that are being implemented. So with that, the formula for deciding what formula funds are truly needs to change. And so I think DCTA, because we are doing all the great things that we're doing, we make a great case study to share with those in DC that make those decisions, and we can work with them to maybe change the formula. Might take some time. It's not something that can happen in the next few months, but I think that we can garner some support when they recognize what we're trying to do and how it would negatively impact us, though we're doing positive things.
Chair Watts, I believe Mr. Franklin has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Board member Denny Franklin.
Yes, go ahead, Denny.
Chair, on the thing about being able to get good data from the students at North Texas, I'm speaking to you as a grandfather that has 3 grandchildren, seniors in college, and a mentee that is also a senior in college. At the first of the year, when they were signing up for their classes, they were in the middle of the pandemic, they were given options, all of them, as to whether they wanted to go to school virtually for the whole semester or go to class. And I'm not certain that somebody that chose to go virtually this year would be carried over into next year when the pandemic is less at front. And I'm not saying that you're not going to see some deviation between this year and after the pandemic, but I do know all my seniors were given options at the first of the year as to how they wanted to complete this semester.
No, that is a very good point, that obviously ridership, even among students, is down. And so, yes, we recognize that that's a good point. I appreciate you bringing it up, because it does show that there's some limitations there, but at least we have something, and we do have ridership data from last year. We just don't have it broken out, but very good point made. I appreciate that. I did not consider that, but in the analysis, I think it's still important that we get some. Well, what you're saying is it's probably not going to be as accurate as what you really were hoping that it would be.
Yeah, it's not
and
like
I agree
you're
with
going to have, like I say, it's certainly needed and certainly need to go through the process, but I wouldn't put high expectations.
Point well taken. Thank you so much. That's great feedback.
All right, I will say that in talking with UNT, the transportation office, they are anticipating next school year to providing 90% of those classes on campus.
Yep.
So we could see, again, they were offering, I think, only required in-person classes like for labs and whatnot over the last school year. So Denny, you're absolutely right, but we're hopeful that we'll see an increase in ridership this next school year.
Okay, so any other questions for staff? Now, did Chris have a presentation? Because if so, I was going to break for lunch for a few minutes and then come back, but if not, we'll break for lunch and come back to the next agenda item. So I didn't know what the next step is.
Sure, I think so. Accenture did provide some slides that are in your PowerPoint that just recap all of the notes from across all 3 of the roundtables. He's certainly available to answer any questions if the board has any questions. Like I said, I think we'll probably pull that out and just send it to the board separately, so it's an easy reference for you.
All right. Any questions directly for Chris on the PowerPoint slides, so the slides that he provided in the staff presentation? And of course, Chris, I guess if we get those and we have questions that come up, we can always contact you and get some clarification.
Of course.
Okay.
Just briefly, that summarizes each of the action items, questions, and requests from each of the member city sessions. we're happy to provide if each of the board members would like to see the detailed action items and adjustments to the zone that each member city requested. We can absolutely follow up with each of you on that, but that's the intent, just to provide a synopsis conversation.
Okay. And that's, I guess, important because that will be part of the special call board meeting where those costs are considered. Yes.
That is what via each action items that DCTA had to provide A-Train data, ridership data, excuse me, to VIA as an input for them to make a recommendation on any adjustments to service hours, for example. So there were member city specific requests, and then there were across the board some adjustments and feedback on those system-wide service changes. Right.
Okay. All right. Any other board members have any questions for Chris on these slides or the process moving forward? I can't really see. We could pull that slide down. Any questions or comments? I think TJ's got somebody there that might have a question or a comment. Yeah.
No, he's good. He's good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's take a break. It's 12:06. I've got to sort of get some lunch and do some things. So if we could come back at 12:20, 12:25, we'll sort of move through this quickly and get started again. See y'all then. All right, sorry about that. So we'll just wait till we get everybody back on. Okay, it looks like we have a quorum, but we'll wait till I get the official readout from staff.
Yes, sir. It looks like everybody is back and ready to go to start on the next item.
All right, well, we'll call this meeting back to order of the Denton County Transportation Authority at 12:26. We are proceeding with our agenda item 8, I believe, which is review and discuss project manager office progress report.
Thank you. So staff has provided a progress report on pages 353 and 354 in your packet, but Accenture has provided a detailed status report in the remaining pages of this item. So I'd like to turn it over to Chris Newport, who can kind of go through the status report and answer any board questions.
Thank you, Nicole. So the first page that's in your board packet, Chair and members of the board, is an overview of the activities since we kicked off task order 2. The bulk of the activities were around facilitating the member city roundtables or the MOS service transition conversations with VIA. We also had the opportunity to have an introductory conversation with the Trinity Metro team to introduce ourselves, number one, but as well to make a request for some information that that will be important considerations potentially for the ERP replacement project. So that was largely around the technologies that that Trinity Metro uses and deploys today. And we had a solid initial conversation with them, and they were open with their information, which was great. A note just to jump into the issue and mitigation. Unsurprisingly, the winter storm Uri did disrupt the project timeline, both from agency availability, of course, as well as a few members of both our team and the DCTA team were personally impacted by that event. What we did is we shifted a few of our project resources over to get some ahead of time on the ERP replacement and the potential approach for that we're still in discussion with staff. But I think one of the things to highlight here is the discussion that we had around the initiative set, the prioritization and sequencing of those. We had a discussion with the executive team early on. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Next slide. Had a discussion with Raymond and the executive team shortly after we kicked off task order 2, just to level set again on the roadmap initiatives, and then really think about the conversations that had begun during phase 1 around the potential partnerships with and the regional collaboration with both DART, with Trinity Metro, and then VIA, and understanding where each of those conversations were, how to best line up the transformation roadmap initiatives against those ongoing conversations. So what came out of that conversation was, given everything that the authority has on its plate and the aspirations that it has, we made a decision to add, number one, what you're seeing here, this is reorganized in 2 primary ways from a structural perspective. The first is you'll see that we've gone away from, in this high level view, from organizing each of these initiatives as organization and governance 1, 2, 3, service 1, 2, 3, for example, technology 1, 2, and given the sequencing and the categorization that we're using now, it's an authority-wide initiative. So that being the change number 1. Change number 2 being that you can see that we have organized these for the first several items here under 5 overarching initiatives. So you can see this enhanced regional coordination being item 1, items that were previously listed separately on your roadmap initiative at the conclusion of phase 1 of the transformation initiative have been put under that regional coordination header where that makes where that's appropriate. So the same methodology was used for category 2, mobility orchestration and MOS member city service. So we have 3 roadmap initiatives organized under that header. Next being this item 6 that you see, upgrade point of sale systems, contactless fare management. Have the conversations regarding GoPass integration and evaluation of the mixed payment technology system and the implications that might have for touchless fare, automated fare management, et cetera, et cetera. So there weren't, I think the largest changes from what the board saw, but besides those formatting related and organizational related modifications, were that we, given the conversations with VIA, with Trinity Metro, with DART, we prioritized the items that now fall under enhancing regional coordination, and then mobility orchestration and MOS member city service. We also pulled forward the hiring of a IT project management resource, given the extent that that technology modifications could potentially come into play. So the idea being that you would ideally have an IT project management resource in place upstream of making a decision on a replacement ERP system, as well as how interfaces will need to be built or will be handled between DCTA and any of these partnerships that the authority might establish, and the technology solutions that they would bring to the benefit of DCTA. So with that, I'll pause and just see if there are any questions. This is, you have seen this before. It is in slightly different format and ordering, but the board's priorities, as you shared them with us during phase 1, are still reflected as the top priorities here of both staff of the authority writ large.
Okay, any questions? If we could pull the slide down so I can see the panel. Any questions for Chris? Comments?
TJ?
TJ?
Chris, yeah, Chris, just
excuse me, Chair Watts.
That's okay. We'll figure it out. The bold represents just the top 14. Is that, just refresh me on the formatting of that?
Yes, that's right.
Top half.
That's right. Those that, if you recall, TJ, we had a line, right, that we recommended that the board consider being their top priorities, which the board validated. That's right.
I'm worried about the GoPass and the customer experience being a little bit low on that list. But I'm thinking we had some conversations on why that had to be that way from a staging standpoint. But
yes, sir. That's right. I think there are still, our discussion previously was that many of the initiatives around regional collaboration, mobility orchestration, and the MOS member city service would potentially bring along with it, when agreements are established, that will, just because of the tools that those partners would bring to bear, will improve the customer experience or the rider experience and the journeys that they go on to secure a trip, et cetera. That item was focused more specifically on the downstream type of activities after you get systems in place, and really a refinement of being able to understand the journey that your customers are going on and focus in on iterative improvements of those. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, just as long as we're being focused on that customer experience all the way through, which I think part of that is also in our outreach that we've talked about already. And, I would like to have a little bit more detail on what VIA is bringing to the table for those transition plans as well. And I'm sure we'll get that when the time's appropriate. So that's all. Thank you, sir.
Good news, if I may, Chris. VIA does, as part of their proposal, plan on having integration with GoPass. So we will have that. It's kind of a two-stream approach. So there'll be some initial implementation where there's already integrated fare payment solutions through GoPass with VIA. But to be completely integrated, it's going to be kind of a separate phase that's standing out on its own.
Thank you, teacher.
Any other questions, comments? Do we have any raised hands, Lindsay?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay. All right. If not, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.
We'll move on to agenda item 9, which is discuss potential 35W corridor high intensity bus service. This should be a fairly quick discussion.
All right, I hear you.
No, I'm just being
the
silly.
memo can be found on packet pages 365 through 366. And the memo is very inclusive of information. I could probably just say just a couple of things. One, I want to explain why I added it to the agenda. We did have a recent meeting with the Council of Governments to discuss the Denton County Transit Study. It was a kickoff meeting. And during that meeting, high intensity bus was discussed as one of the topics. And with this particular board, we haven't had a lot of discussion about high intensity bus, the concept or any implementation, because honestly, COG and DCTA, we haven't had discussions about this particular initiative in a couple years. So that kickoff meeting did inspire or ignite some additional conversation with DCTA staff and Council of Government staff. Primarily, the region is focusing on implementing high intensity bus on the southern portion of the 35W corridor. So in Trinity Metro's service area. And that's because the concept really focuses on implementing service along a highway corridor that has an express lane. And 35W on the northern side in DCTA service area does not have express lanes. But the Council of Governments had included us in high intensity bus implementation plan for the future, but we are really 3 to 5 years away from DCTA seeing any implementation of that type of project because the Council of Governments in the region want to focus on the Trinity Metro portion first. So I wanted to provide some additional information to the board so that way when we're having discussions in the future about what does the North Texas Express service look like along the 35W corridor, from staff's perspective in the past, we always kind of thought North Texas Express would be a precursor to high intensity bus service. But because the timeline has continued to be pushed out for Trinity Metro's implementation, we're looking at a significant delay before DCTA is able to even consider implementing that service. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I did just want to provide some background and a brief overview of the concept.
Okay. Any questions for staff? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Christina. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Discuss board members' cybersecurity training.
Yes.
Is this our shaming session? That we
No,
haven't
no,
done
no.
it? Oh, okay. I didn't know if we hadn't done it or not. Yeah.
if you do recall, we haven't asked you to do yet. That's what this
Okay.
session is about right now.
Okay.
But in August, we did perform our cybersecurity assessment, and Javier Trilla, our director of IT, came on and gave you an overview along with the consultant. So he's going to talk to you a little bit about kind of a next step from the board's perspective and what we need the board members to do to get us into compliance. Go ahead, Javier.
Hi, everyone. As Christina mentioned, the cybersecurity assessment that we had several months back, one of the findings and recommendations was to go ahead and proceed with both staff cybersecurity training as well as board cybersecurity training. We all have to follow basically the same path on getting shored up and certifying that we've completed it. It's also a requirement per Texas House Bill 3834. And the training is provided to us at no charge by the Texas Department of Information Resources. We're using both a short training video they provide to us as well as a certification completion process that kind of sends me a report attesting that everybody's completed their training. And I am requesting that all that training be completed by May of this year. For what it's worth, it's not painful. It's a 30-minute video that is linked through YouTube. There are no questions. There's no quiz at the end. Just watch it, complete the form, and that's all I ask of you.
And
Well,
that
fair enough.
information will be included in the Friday email that Lindsay will be sending out. So it'll have the link and then all the details.
No, thanks, Christina.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Sounds like that's pretty straightforward. All right. Thank you, Javier. Appreciate that.
Thank you all.
All right. We'll move on to agenda item number 11, staff briefing on recent inclement weather response and recovery.
So I know that we have been providing regular updates through our alert system to the board during the storm. But I did want to provide a little more detail as to how the power outages and the winter storm impacted DCTA facilities, service, and staff. We're still in the middle of recovery efforts, but I'll show you some information on that too. On this first slide, this is just kind of a glimpse into ridership. As a reminder, during that week, we did not operate UNT shuttle service at the request of UNT, and because of many reasons that we'll get into, there was no A-train service. So the services that were provided, we provided Denton and Louisville Connect route service, as well as some of our access service. I wanted to give you a glimpse as to what ridership looked like on Connect routes. I mean, kudos to the operations team for being able to continue to provide service. We did have a more limited service than we normally do, as we operated a Saturday schedule throughout the entire week. But you'll see our ridership was significantly low that week. Next slide, please. As far as from the bus operations side, in order for them to provide that service, they did need to use some tire chains on their vehicles, which caused some speed restrictions. Then Denton was under a significant boil order. And so we worked with the city of Denton on getting some bottled water for our bus operations staff as they were coming in and out of our facilities and working on the buses providing service. For Louisville Dispatch, they did have to relocate because of facility damage of where they normally office. And also from the bus op side in Louisville, because there was a power outage at the facility where they normally operate, that did impact our fueling capability and cause them to need to use retail locations to fuel our buses instead of our local fuel tank that we have. From A-train operations, as I mentioned, service was canceled for the week. There was commercial power outage, not only at the rail operations and maintenance facility in Louisville, but significant power loss along the entire corridor. On some of the calls that we were on with the county, it sounded like you would hear many stories about the Lake Dallas, Lake Cities area being without power for many days. So that did impact our control points and bungalows, our crossings all along the corridor. because there was no power, we do have backup power, but that only lasts so long. It cannot sustain a 5-day power outage. Our rail operations and maintenance facility, because of being out of power for 4 days at that facility, we did sustain significant damage because we did have the fire suppression system freeze and burst, majorly impacting the second and first floors. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple shots from the second floor. You can see the amount of water that accumulated in the conference room and in some of the staff offices. We are very grateful for Rio Grande Pacific, our rail operator, as they are responsible for this facility. So they worked with the different vendors to come in and do cleanup, assess the damage, and get everything all dried out for us. Next slide. Here are just a few more pictures. The ones on the left are from the first floor. Again, you see some standing water and some of the insulation that fell from the ceiling and ceiling tiles. And when you would go back over there while we were in the midst of recovery, it was very loud as we had all these commercial fans and dehumidifiers running to try to salvage what we have. Rio Grande Pacific is still working with the various vendors to estimate any additional damage. The biggest question right now is, did we dry it out enough where nothing needs to be replaced? We do not know the answer to that, but we should in the next couple of days. Next slide, please. We also sustained significant damage, well, not as significant damage at our administrative offices. We did not have a pipe break, but because we are in a business plaza, our neighbors did have a pipe burst, which ended up causing some flooding in some of our offices and our conference room and our lobby. So the water damage was able to be dried out, again, with fans, because since it wasn't as significant, and we were able to address that pretty quickly. This facility was out of power for almost 5 days, so more than 5 days. Next page, please. Here's a picture we don't get to see in North Texas very often. Lots of snow. I mean, usually it's the shiny ice, but this is actually snow that bus operations had to deal with. Next slide. And, you know, we always talk about in our communities, many things take a village, and this weather event was no different. And we are so grateful for the good partnerships that we have with our member cities and the county. We were included in the countywide calls that happened on a regular basis to touch base on what TxDOT roads looked like, how the different cities and counties were addressing the issues, because clearly that impacts our bus operations. So getting to receive up-to-date information on the roads within our member cities. And then even having the power companies on that call was very helpful. So we're very grateful for our partnership with the county. I mentioned earlier, the city of Louisville provided us, or sorry, of Denton, provided us with some bottled water, and they even gave us some sand. We started running out of salt, and so we needed to supplement our supply with some sand, and we were grateful that they were able to share that with us. And the city of Louisville came to aid and provided us temporary facilities for our Louisville bus operations staff to work out of, because they typically work out of the first floor of the rail operations and maintenance facility. And with the damage that we had from the flooding, they could not operate there. So they took immediate action, bus operations did, and they started operating out of a bus in the parking lot. I mean, talk about creativity. They made it work, so kudos to them, but we felt that they needed something a little more stable. So the city of Louisville was very gracious and let us use some of their space at City Hall. You know, it was a two-way street. I was happy that we were able to be there for the county and for our member cities and help them with some of their requests. And with the Denton County Texas Motor Speedway Vaccination Clinic, before the major freeze came, there was significant cold weather. So we did provide some buses to service warming stations for the volunteers and for the staff out there so they could take breaks and get warm. We also worked with the city of Louisville and city of Denton and promoted the warming centers that each of the cities set up And all of our routes served all of the warming centers. So that was great. In Louisville, one of the buses had to make a very small deviation. But then we instituted a free fare for any of those passengers that were traveling to the warming centers. So for those that were traveling either to or from the warming centers, we did not charge them a fare to ride the Connect bus service. And had a great conversation with the city of Louisville, and appreciate Claire giving us the call and thinking ahead, knowing that the temperatures were going to be well below freezing. She wanted to have an option for when Louisville Fire Department maybe responded to an apartment complex or some type of a high density residential dwelling, knowing they would need something to help keep the residents warm while they had to evacuate their house and until Red Cross could come. So we did stage a bus in Louisville that was available for the city of Louisville's fire department in the event that they needed to respond to some type of large fire. Thankfully, they did not need that resource, so that was a good thing, but we were ready to go in the event we needed it. Next slide. As I mentioned, we're continuing through the restoration and recovery process, and that once we get through all of that, we'll be able to better finalize the cost impacts from the storm, and we'll be able to share that with the board whenever that's available. We did meet and had a debrief meeting with staff to talk about what were some lessons learned and some areas of improvement, things we could proactively take on to be ready for any future type of inclement weather. And we talked about it's not even just the severe cold winter weather, but it's also the hot temperatures that we have here in North Texas in the summer. So one of the things that came out of what we are going to move forward in is to go ahead and develop some MOUs with our member cities and the county and get arrangements set up for those things that may come available or that may become an issue that we can assist with during weather related events, such as having a vehicle ready, whether it's a warming or a cooling station, and kind of go ahead and get that process identified. But all in all, I mean, it was a really rough week. We had a lot of staff without power, so they were working from their cell phones. But again, with the partnerships that we had between the member cities and the county, we were not alone, and they were not alone either. So we appreciate all of the support that we had and all of the understanding of our passengers and recognizing that we provided the best service that we could to them during that interesting weather week that we had. And I can answer any questions.
All right, any questions? Thank you, Christina. Any questions or comments? Anybody? Well, I certainly appreciate the hard work that DCTA staff did during that just unprecedented week. I mean, I couldn't imagine. And it seems like that the fire sprinkler systems is what got a lot of people.
Yes.
It's what got the universities. It's what got a lot of the doctors' offices and all the professional buildings. They just couldn't stand up to that. So, but appreciate the yeoman's work and just the commitment that DCTA staff has, even through some very trying times with staff members personally in their own homes with no power and things such as that. It just really goes to show the caliber of people that, are committed to their mission and committed to the community and the people that are in our member cities. So really do appreciate that, and hats off and kudos to the leadership team and all the staff up and down the line who really did their best to try to keep things and to minimize as much the impact on the facilities and on the communities, but also while maintaining their safety and their health. So thank you. And thanks to the member cities who also really partnered in the county to really come through to just everybody work together the best that they could given the circumstances. And I think that's really the thing that came out of this event was, we're going to learn a lot of things about how to do things differently, not just at this agency, but I think statewide. But what it really showed was the resilience of our people and their willingness to really fill in the gap when things get tough. So really appreciate everybody's hard work on that.
I like to echo those comments as well, Chair. I think they did it. I think that our DCTA did a tremendous job. I applaud the authority and for you guys being forward thinking to start looking at lessons learned. I know being a former city employee, all cities have to do a risk and resiliency study. I'm pretty certain the cities of Denton and Louisville have already completed theirs. And I can tell you from personal experience, we considered many different disaster scenarios, from tornadoes to terrorist events to the dam at Louisville Lake breaching. But we never considered a freeze below zero that lasted that long. And I know from talking to colleagues, that is something that all agencies, as you said, Mayor, are now rethinking. And that's going to be added to how we do future emergency planning and preparation statewide, at least certainly up here in the North Texas area.
Yep. Thank you for those comments. Anybody else? Well, I see Nicole Recker's name, but then I don't see Nicole, but that's okay. We're gonna
Yet another technical difficulty.
We'll leave it at that.
Computer
Yeah,
froze up,
yeah,
so I'm
okay.
Nicole right now.
Okay, all right. All right, we'll move on then to agenda item number 12, which is discuss local and regional transportation updates and legislative issues. Diane, do you have anything? I really don't have anything. Or Raymond, do y'all have some updates or?
So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to talk about our meeting with DRMC, which is the Dallas Regional Mobility Coalition. Okay. And I just didn't know how familiar the board was with this, but it's a great group that comes together monthly and obviously by Zoom. But there are, every month, there's a report given by Michael Morris, someone representing DART, TxDOT, and of course, we're on that list as well. And so our report this month was to just many of the things that Christina just talked about. I talked about how we handled the weather response and recovery, and included when we got to the COVID issue, how I had never seen an organization work the way it does. I went for my second shot last week, and it's just amazing. And it felt so proud to see a DART vehicle there. I'm not a DART, a DCTA vehicle. And we also, I talked about our mobility as a service update, which I think is very exciting. We talked about how each member city was able to meet with our providers and look at specific needs of each of our communities. Highland Village is very different. And so to be able to sit down and have that conversation about what is the best for Highland Village, what is the best for Denton and the best for Louisville. I think that we're steps ahead in many of that, in that area. I also reminded everyone that March the 18th is our driver appreciation for our bus drivers and really all of our workers for DCTA. So we need to let them know that we are very proud of what they're doing and very grateful for what they've done, especially during these crazy times. It was very interesting because we have a speaker every month, and this month it was Representative Chris Patty he's chair of the House Affairs Committee, and there's going to be there are several bills in committee that they're looking at to address what happened to Texas during this time. So House Bill 5 is going to be related to the expansion of broadband services to certain areas. Let's see, House Bill 10 is going to be relating to the government body of the independent organization certified, manage the ERCOT power region. So I don't think he thought he was going to be this busy, but they are really getting after what happened and how it affected everyone and what the true issues were and how they're going to go about addressing those as well. So it was a great meeting, and I just wanted to share some of the topics.
All right, thank you. Raymond, did you have anything?
Yes, I have a few items here. Thank you. First, let me say that I just want to accent the fact that this county, the leadership of this county is second to none. Just the exceptional service that the county has set up at Texas Motor Speedway. We learned this morning on a region-wide call that the Biden administration has actually taken notice of how well orchestrated and how effective the Texas Motor Speedway vaccination clinic actually is, to the extent that they've asked for documents, processes, because they want to try to model what's happening at the Texas Motor Speedway. And I can tell you on that same call, we heard where there's other parts of the region that it's taking hours to get through and not even coming close to vaccinating the number of people. It's a tremendous, as you know, because a lot of your staff have contributed to the volunteerism at the Texas Motor Speedway. The county judge reached out. We've had several meetings. He asked for DCTA to take a leadership role. He felt like it was a great opportunity for this agency to demonstrate not only locally, but nationally what we're capable of doing. He gathered together SPAN, which is our rural provider in the region. He asked the Rotarians, the head of the Rotarians across the county, to join in a call, and he asked me to engage and to provide some orchestration, if you will, for people, because what they wanted to do was include DCTA as an opportunity to get people that really needed transportation that didn't otherwise have it across the county to get to the Texas Motor Speedway. So over the course of literally 60 days, we had multiple conversations about how we might be able to do that. There's still some bumps, but I can tell you that we received over 2,000 calls from people across the county that were looking for transportation to Texas Motor Speedway in 1 week. And that 2,000 calls is typically what we get. It's more than what we get in a month. Our call center took the direct responsibility for vetting out those calls. A couple of times, up to 3 times a day, we're meeting with SPAN. SPAN is focused on delivering services directly to the Texas Motor Speedway outside of our service area. But in some cases, if they're in Little Elm or the Colony and it's more efficient for them to drop people off at our shuttles, we have shuttles that leave at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 and 2 p.m. And they go from Hebron and from the downtown Denton Transit Center directly to the Texas Motor Speedway. We have a dedicated lane. There's representatives from TMS that get on, process everybody. It moves to the next station. They get their shots. It moves to the next station to make sure that there's no negative reaction to the vaccines, and they come straight back to the stations, and then they either drive home or they have someone pick them up and take them to their house. I met with several of the customers that were just exceptionally ecstatic with the service. We had a lady that came from Carrollton that said that her grandchildren were the ones that took her for her first shot, but they were in school. She had no other way to get there. SPAN picked her up, brought her to our station, and she was just very blessed that we were able to provide that service. And she said, I'd never ridden transit before, but just what she was so impressed with was just the customer service, how pleasant everybody was. And she was just incredibly thankful to DCTA and really to all the people in this region that are working together to make that happen. We still have a few things to work on. There's an acknowledgement from the county judge that we can't continue to sustain this with just volunteers, that we have to make sure that we understand what the cost and the implications are to the cities and to DCTA. But he's also looking for us to continue to support this service. I think it's a great humanitarian effort. I can tell you, I'm just so proud and grateful to the staff. They do a tremendous job. So on top of the weather event, we were standing up this service, taking people to and from Texas Motor Speedway, providing warming stations with big buses because the volunteers were freezing in the freezing cold out there. And it's just been an amazing thing to watch how people step up. This team is very much in their heart dedicated to service to our communities. And it's just been a great humanitarian effort across the entire region. And hats off to Andy Eads and the county. They're not only providing tremendous leadership in our region, but it's been noticed nationwide. And I just think it's a proud time for the entire region. I also want to bring up some really good news is that, and I think Christina mentioned this earlier, there's an outstanding leadership team led by Paul Skatelis at the American Public Transit Association in Washington, D.C. I've seen many leaders in the past of APTA, but none like Paul. He's incredibly collaborative. He reaches out to the agencies directly. We've had an opportunity to sit in roundtables as a small agency with some of the large agencies and provide direct feedback in Washington, D.C. And through his leadership, he reached out to the CEOs across the country with this latest round of funding, stimulus funding. And he asked us, are you going to need additional funds in the future? He asked us to fill out a survey. So I did that and requested north of $15 million of additional funding because I felt it was important that we continue to address the changes that all transit agencies are facing in looking at transit in a very different way. We can't assume that transit's going to be handled the same way it was in the past. Travel patterns are changing, human behavior is changing, and all the things that we're doing with this transformation initiative and delivering service, if you're not paying attention to it, and I believe we are, then shame on whoever's not doing that. I'm happy to state that hopefully by tomorrow, if there's no future changes or amendments to the funding package that's proposed, that it's not 100% yet, but it appears that we'll receive around $15 million of additional federal funds through this next funding round. So I think that's just going to help us achieve a lot of things. It certainly affords us the ability to continue to support with this funding some of the things that we're doing on a regional basis in support of the TMS. So I'm just really happy to report that. And then lastly, with the new administration, I can't stress enough how important it is that we continue as an agency to engage at a national level. And sometimes it's hard to believe that an agency of our size can move the needle at all in Washington, D.C. But our past board chairs have acknowledged this themselves. They've experienced it themselves, that we have opportunities to sit right in front of the head of the DOT, the head of the FTA, the head of the FRA. We have direct meetings with not only those individuals, but their entire staff. They write lots of notes. They give us suggestions. And that is paramount in engaging, but also recognizing just the human behavior that if we're spending time nationally to come visit them, it pays off in federal funds. So just in the CARES Acts alone, we're receiving roughly $38.5 million, assuming that we get this next round. And I've asked Marissa, hopefully in April, we can come back and just do a comprehensive analysis of how much federal dollars we actually receive in a 5-year timeframe. It's pretty impressive. In March, there's an Energy Independence Summit that I've signed up for. If there's any interest from board members to sit in on that, it's actually a 2-week opportunity. They're going to, this Energy Summit is really to look at the Biden administration's interest in clean air coalitions. How do we look at climate change? what opportunities can the federal government provide as far as federal assistance in projects. Gina McCarthy, the House National Climate Advisor, is going to be there. Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation. We have the Secretary of Energy, EPA Administrator, several House Energy Commerce Committee members, the House Transportation Committee member, and Senate Finance Committee member that are all going to be available over a 2-week period. I've asked our legislative consultant to set up a few meetings. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for DCTA to get ahead of things, to meet with some of the key members of the new administration and start building that relationship. And I do believe in late FY21, we may have an opportunity to actually, my hope is that we actually can start having face-to-face visits with people again. So we'll be sending out a copy of this summit. Again, it's next week and the week after. It's not going to tie up all of our time. We're just looking at potential opportunities to have some face time, even if it's virtual, with some of this new leadership, so that we can continue to have success in garnering federal funds. And I think that's all I have. Let me see if there's anything else. Nicole, is there anything that, the mask mandate. So there's been a lot of discussion about the announcement from our state in taking the mask mandate or no longer requiring mask mandates in the state of Texas. But DCTA is under, through a federal mandate, is still required to follow the federal mask mandate for transit. So at this time, we're still requiring masks to be worn on our transit system. What we've been able to tell so far is the majority of folks are still wearing their masks. And we've had very, very few folks that aren't. And when they're asked to put one on, they typically do. We'll continue to assess that as we move forward, as people get more comfortable not wearing masks. But the general consensus across the regional transit authorities is that we're going to continue to abide by the federal requirement of wearing masks, but we wanted to make you aware of that in case someone from your community asks a question. And I think that's the last update I had, right? Okay. So
Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Don't see any hands or being told that there are any hands. So thank you both for those comprehensive updates. That's good information to know. Appreciate it. Thank you. So then we move on to our informational reports, and these are reports that if you have any, there's not staff presentation, it's my understanding, but staff stands ready and stands by to answer any questions that you may have on any one of these informational reports. I've got one question, but I wanted to see, does any of the other board members have any questions on any of the informational reports 1 through 7? Do I need to call these out individually, Joe? Or do I need to call these out individually as sort of agenda items?
No, you can just refer to them collectively as the information reports 1 through 7.
Okay, all right. I think I just did that. So any questions? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and pose mine on information report number 7, where it talks about the action flow chart. One of the items is the NTMC negotiations with the bus riders, or with the union. Question is, we're on a tight time frame for that, and if we, depending on the decision that we make with the ILA, with Trinity Metro, and them handling negotiation, I just need some just real brief update of what's our plan and process there, because we're negotiating with them, and the contract expires when, at the end of, is it this month or next month?
So the contract currently expires March 31st.
Okay.
NTMC management has coordinated with the international ATU representatives to begin the negotiation project on the process on the 23rd and the 24th of this month.
Okay.
So I had mentioned earlier, NTMC does have a legal requirement to begin that negotiation process prior to the expiration.
All right, so that's sort of a formal statutory requirement.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So then at any moment in that time, if the negotiations are still ongoing, but the decision is made to, I mean, I guess if we decide to let.
Mayor, let me throw this
Yes.
out there.
Do we need to do this in executive session?
No. What we could do is we could provide the board with an attorney, just basically a memo from me that kind of outlines the process and kind of the if whats and just kind of a legal memorandum that I could provide to you. Probably we'll get with our other counsel that's representing us during the negotiations. Provide that to you maybe midweek next week. And
Okay.
we can kind of go from there. It could be more detailed in that legal memo as opposed to covering it today.
Okay, no, that's fine. I appreciate that. And if you could include in that, if there was a desire to move in a different direction as far as, this turnkey project and those negotiations, how does that impact the current ones, if any? And what that process would look like.
Absolutely.
From a legal perspective. Yep. All right, fantastic. That's all I have for the information reports. Does anybody else have anything else on the informational reports? We'll move on then to future agenda items and board member requests. Looks like our next scheduled board meeting is April 22nd. That's regularly scheduled, but then we have a special call meeting early in April. So I'll let staff talk about this if there's some comment on it.
For the special called meeting, Lindsay did send out a Survey Monkey to get some availability from the board. And I think she was late yesterday. I think we received the majority of the
I know, I was
availability.
the holdout.
I wasn't going to call you out.
I'll call myself out. Yeah, sorry.
But it sounds like it's looking like April 7th is the date that's got the best availability for the board members. And Chair Watts, I think what staff will need from you is, I know that initially Nicole's plan was to have the meeting from 9 to noon, but I think there was maybe some discussion making it 10 to noon and we could probably try to get it done in 2 hours.
Yeah, or move it. It's just to get started in the morning. Sometimes 9 o'clock is pretty early given where I am. 10 o'clock works really good. So,
Okay.
10 to noon, I think if we've got, all the information we need at the time or beforehand, and we've read through our information, we can come and have a pretty efficient meeting. But if we need to go past that, then we'll go past it.
Okay, so we will plan on from 10 to noon, and Lindsay will send that calendar invite out probably tomorrow.
Okay. I've got it all ready to go for today.
Oh, okay, she'll have it done today. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on that future agenda items and board member requests?
Nothing really from me, Chair. I do have a conflict, I think, at 12 something that 7th. So I may have to leave soon after noon.
Well, then I'll run as tight a meeting as I've ever run.
We'll work it through.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. You bet.
And Mayor, I did want to point out on page 418, included in the informational reports, is a proposed budget calendar to reference additional meetings that will be held later this summer. So if everyone on the board could just take a look at that calendar, let us know if you have any conflicts. We have just one additional meeting that we're proposing for the budget workshop to be held in June. So if you would, and then everything else would be in conjunction with the regularly scheduled board meetings. So if you would just take a look at that and let me know, or Lindsay, if any conflicts with that schedule.
All right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Report on items of community interest.
Mr. Chair, I did want to update the board. I had received some requests at the time that we lost Brandy about how, actually from both boards, how we could help recognize that. At the time of her celebration of life, the family did not have anything in place, but her mother had really requested that we consider a fund for her son, 16-year-old son. We didn't want to call it a college fund, but a higher education fund. And so I did receive an email from Brandy's sister with the information. And if the board's okay, I would like for Lindsay to forward that that information to both boards if they are, if they're wanting to look at the trust that was set up with Wells Fargo account for Casey Brandy's son.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? A report on items of community interest? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on then to, do we have any executive session agenda items, anything to talk about in executive session?
We do not.
All right. Well, we're not going to reconvene in open session because we're already here. And therefore, it seems like we have no more official business for this board meeting. So do I need a motion to adjourn or do I just adjourn?
You could do it either way, whatever you prefer.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Second? I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Y'all have a good day. Thank you so much.
you.
You bet.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, board.